Welcome to Codex Rex, the video game history podcast. I am your host, Tyler.
And I am your co-host, Dachz.
Dachz!
This is a podcast about video game history. we never talk about who, we should have, I'm going to do the thing where we talk about the video game history podcast, okay, right? This is a podcast that is called Video Game History Podcast, right, guys? And we talk about video game history. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to explain here, but in the end, it's a podcast about video game history, where one person talks about video game history and the other does too, surprisingly. That's the whole gist. So we're going to skip that part, and now we're going to go to the part where I ask you how you are.
Oh, wow, okay. This was a good intro. We did it. We are good at this.
We are good at intros.
I'm doing okay, man. I have been on a Kenshi kick lately, and it has just gripped me so utterly. Have you ever played that game, Kenshi?
I have never played Kenshi, no.
Okay, it'll ruin your life. Kenshi is like, the reason it is so compelling is that you start the game off as like a single character, and you kind of like make your character. It's not nearly as in-depth as you might think. And then it's just kind of like you're in a setting. There's no like goal. You kind of make your own goals. Like, you want to play the entire game as one character for 200 hours just going around punching people, you can do that. You want to recruit a massive army and build a base and start taking on other factions, you can do that. It's
like mega open worldy, right? But also
super
real-time simulation thing, where also every character that you have has something like that. I have something vague in my head,
Yep, that's basically what it is. Like, what if each character was its own, like, RPG character?
Okay, cool.
I love it. It's really jank, and you kind of need mods to make it stable. I also downloaded a mod that let me recruit more people. But I go through phases, like, on my stream where it's, like, I'll play for, like, 2 months, and then I'll drop it for, like, a year. And then someone will start asking when I'm going to play Kenshi again, and I'll go, oh, yeah, I could play a little bit of Kenshi. And then it is just, like, all the tendrils have gripped into my brain, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's like all I talk to my wife about, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna like kill me if I tell her like, oh my god, I finally unlocked hydroponics, and she's just like, yeah, wow. That's great. What are we
It's better than you playing Darkest Dungeons, I bet.
Oh my you want to talk about a game that broke me. But anyway, yeah, that's been my big thing, and I've been playing a bunch of little random stuff off stream. But what about you, man? What have you been up to? What have you been playing?
I found a really nice game. Like you like The Return of the Obra Dinn, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was Go ahead.
It's like a deduction game. And I have played another game that is like that. It scratches the same itch because The Return of the Obra Dinn you can't really play twice. It won't have the same effect because it's like a mystery game, and in the end you know the mystery, so it doesn't really. It's not as surprising anymore. But I found another game that is like that. It's called Chants of Sennaar. And that is really cool. It's basically a game where you are a character in the Tower of Babel. And you have to kind of learn the language of different people by basically going with like clues, like a person says something to you, and out of context you have to like decipher the glyphs that their sentence was made of. And it's super cool, and in the end you feel so smart when playing it.
What was it called again?
And I really liked it. Chants of Sennaar.
That sounds pretty cool, man. I'm gonna have to check that out. Sometimes
it's a really cool game.
Sometimes I really like puzzle games, and then other times I hate puzzle games. It's hard for me to stream them sometimes because
it's really lighthearted.
Oh, good.
And like many puzzle games are hard to stream because you have to get too much into it and not a lot of stuff is happening. But it's really quick, and you can easily debate your thoughts about it. So I think it's also a very well streamable game.
Okay, good to know.
If you want to do that.
Awesome. Well, dude, I'll check that out. That sounds really neat, especially because you suggested Obra Dinn to me, and I really, really liked that game. It was just incredible.
That game is so insane.
Yeah, so good. Okay. Anything else we should talk about before we...
No, we should maybe tell people how they should contact us if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, the easiest way to do that is just to send us an email at codexrexpodcast@gmail.com. You are also... Oh, I'm also on Twitch. My Twitch handle is Vegan Tyler. And if you come into our Discord, you are welcome to come and hang out with us.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yep, yep, yep. Just as the Germans say.
Shall we get into the episode?
Yes, perhaps we shall, Dachz. You little shit. We're not even going to tell them the context on this. All right. Episode, begin. Away. Keita Takahashi was born in 1975 in Kita, Kyushu, Japan, which is the northernmost city of the southern island of Japan, so the top of the southern island.
Okay.
His father was a deep-sea salvage expert,
Whoa.
which is really cool, right? His mother was a homemaker, but I also heard her described as a math lover.
A math lover?
A math lover, a lover of math.
Okay.
As a child, he was always interested in making things, though he has mentioned in interviews that for a time he wanted to become an airline pilot, but art was always a common thread throughout his life. Quote, I started to go to art class when I was around 4 or 5 years old in Japan. It was so fun. So I got into making and drawing. I became interested in architecture in middle school. And for a time, he dreamed of making, quote, small houses for common families because houses are one of the necessities of modern life, end quote.
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Nice.
so
And
art-
oh man, I love the parallel to Lewis Castle already because he also was into architecture and he was also into art from a very young age.
Yep. There seems to be some threads there, right? The makings of game designers.
Yeah.
But, like many people, Keita Takahashi realized that his dreams would require math. His mother was a math lover. He was not. And he started to back out of architecture. So he decides to study just art in high school instead. He starts to focus more on art. And he enrolled in what is called a juku in Japan, which is basically like a cram school where you study one subject very intensely every evening. And he decides to do this with art.
What's a cram school? What's that?
Like the idea that okay, how do I explain this? Surely in Germany there are some like large like tests or something you might need to take, or like a standardized test somewhere. Like for me, like when I went to get into grad school, I had to take something called the GRE.
Yeah, I think like what we would call the Abitur that you get after high school.
Okay, sure. Or for I guess
That is in Germany that is standardized, so it would allow you to go to any university or grad school program in the country.
Right. Ours would be like the SATs, I think, or maybe ACTs these days as well. But you might go to a cram school to prepare for that test. This is more like, let's say you want to go to college for like a specific subject. You might go to like a school that prepares you in all the fundamentals of that. That's outside of your normal education. That is just that one thing intensely. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, cool. I understand. Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. Okay. Now, I think that is the full extent of what I know about a juku, if that is...
Cool. That's enough.
Yeah.
That explains it.
Okay. During this time, he becomes interested in making sculptures. He didn't find many of the other forms of art to be particularly interesting, but he remembers how much fun he had making things with clay when he was a kid. So he switches his focus then to be more specifically about sculpting. And I'll summarize him here. Basically, it was the tangible nature of creating something, right? Like, it seems like when you look at sculpture, it seems very simple to outsiders, but it requires so much skill to get right. Simple but deep, as he put it. So that was what sculpture was.
The toughest part is also to get Patrick Swayze's ghost to come up behind you and grab you from the back.
That's true.
To help you sculpt.
Yeah, I'm not. I've never been attractive enough to get Patrick Swayze to do that for me, but you know, I guess we'll see how the next couple of years goes. So after high school in 1995, Keita enrolls in the Musashino Art University to study sculpting at the university level. Now, Musashino Art University, or Musabi, is a private university in Kodaira, Western Tokyo. It is founded in 1962, and it has roots going the whole way back to 1929. It is known as one of the leading art universities in Japan, and there have been many famous artists who studied there, including the artist who made Hello Kitty.
Cool.
So this is like kind of a big deal. He gets into a big deal art school. He starts learning sculpting, but then he starts having the thoughts that many artists have. How is he going to make any money as an artist? How's he going to live and eat food and things like that? And plus, learning in cram school was one thing, right? Like, they give him assignments, he would do them, he would move on. But now they're like, cool, it's on you. Make things, right? Things of your own design. And so that's a little scary. And
yeah, I think the dread that comes with that must be really horrifying, because you like, if you have nothing to fall back on, it kind of feels like your skill as an artist entirely decides if your life is going to be enjoyable to live.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I think that, just as a personal anecdote, I don't think this is exactly the same thing, but one of the scariest parts about grad school for me when I first started was, okay, we're going to teach you a little bit about how to do research and stuff like that. But now it's on you. Figure out what you want to research and then find things that no one's ever done before. And that's really daunting when you're first starting out. It's very overwhelming. So now imagine that, like you said, his entire life is going to be based around his skill as an artist, and I can see the dread there. Yep. Okay, so also he starts to see things he doesn't like about art and the art industry. Like, for one, he thought that art, it's often so highbrow that a regular person couldn't appreciate it or interact with it. And so that was one thing he didn't like. And then also he felt like the art he was creating didn't have purpose. So here's a quote about that. Quote, "Making sculpture or art is very useless compared to other jobs like doctors, teachers, or farmers. If there was a ranking board of job importance, sculptor would definitely be very low ranked. Also, if I just made a typical sculpture, even though everyone loves it, you might have to go to a gallery or a museum to see it. When you feel hungry, food is much more important than great art. So that made me think that art is so useless. But unfortunately, I like to make things, so I had to find an answer for myself."
That is a very, like, I'm not an expert in how the Japanese culture perceives itself, or how people within the Japanese culture, but for me, in my prejudiced mind, this sounds like how someone from a society like Japan, that is lots about what is your worth to society, would think about artists. Like, this is completely useless. Though someone like I would absolutely agree that the sculptor is not the lowest job. The lowest job on the tier list is absolutely podcaster.
I was gonna say CEO of Twitter, but I guess it's X now.
Yeah, maybe that.
I just have to do an aside. Did you see what the new AI, there's like some new AI you can subscribe to on Twitter or X or whatever the fuck it is, and it's called Grok. 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 Subscribe to Grok. And I just am like, did a 13-year-old make this name? Like, what is this? Like, I don't know.
Maybe it's a reference to the Lord of the Rings memes, Gronk. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway,
Let's
back to
carry
it.
on.
Yeah. Okay. Also, he very much disliked how after every assignment, his classmates would just throw away whatever they had sculpted. Like, they would make this art and they would throw it out. When Andrea was in grad school, we would see this a lot. It would really bother us. It was creating all this waste, and he was not interested in making things just for the purpose of making them and then to throw them away. And so he really starts to go, okay, I'm studying art, and I think that my art should be something different. What if it was more whimsical? What if it was more funny? What if the items he made had some kind of use or function? And from this, he starts to find his own style. In one anecdote from that time, a professor asks them to create a goat sculpture, which he did. But the goat sculpture was also a flower pot. I will send you pictures. And because it was a flower pot, when you watered it, water would come out of the udders.
Ooh, that's so cool.
I cannot forget that moment when everyone started laughing, Keita Takahashi says. That was when I realized what I should do, and I believed video games could provide joy and fun to people. So, as you might imagine, after he finishes his degree, he decides he's going to change his focus to video games. Here's some more quotes on that.
Just saying, because viewers are going to think this, listeners, this seems like a bit of a leap. I made a goat that where water came out of the udders. This must mean that I must design video games. It is the obvious conclusion.
Well,
I feel like there are steps in between that we are not being told.
Well, okay, so let's. It seems like maybe there's a little bit of my script here a little out of order, but let's just talk broadly about how this guy sees the world. And this is kind of a weird quote, but you'll see. So he kind of like he gets from this that he should make people happy. Okay, like that making people happy is the best thing that he could do. He had these greater aspirations for his art. So here's a quote. What I came up with is very simple. I thought that I would like to do something that makes people happy. It's so simple that you might think I really didn't give it much thought. But at that time, I thought, if a person could be happy or laugh even just a little bit, even for a moment, then they won't rush off to work, and people and countries will perhaps stop fighting and doing these unnecessary battles. And in an extreme sense, perhaps this might, in italics, emphasized, might lead to a lack of racial discrimination and wars.
Wow. John Lennon right there.
Okay, so he's in college. He makes someone laugh with his art, cool. And he goes, maybe I could stop racial discrimination and wars with this. But I see what he's going for, right? I see what he's going for.
It's a larger picture, right? Just want to do your part in it, right?
Right. I'm teasing, but I see his point, right? Like, make people happy, and if people are happy, they won't fight each other. I get it.
Don't be such a cynic, Tyler. I'm the cynic. You're the nice guy.
That's true. Yes. So, okay. So, why video games? Just to center this a little more, right? He wants to make people happy, but art isn't going to make him money in the way that he wants. He'd make things, but he wasn't sure what people would do with them. And so he starts thinking about video games. Also, as an aside, just to talk more about his fun little sculptures, I have a picture of another one. He would make stuff like, okay, here's a table, but it requires two people to work together, and then it turns into a robot. Or
I just want to say to the listeners, this goat that you showed me looks like a perfect goat. This is like the best goat I've seen ever sculpted. It's genius. And it is also a perfect flower pot. And I can see a glimpse of the udder, and it's brilliant. The best udder I've ever seen. And I've seen real udders, but this is like a fake udder. It's a real deal. Okay, show me another thing. Show me.
Okay.
I want to see it.
Okay. So this one I particularly enjoy. Okay. So it's a shelf.
Okay. Let me describe it this time. Okay.
You describe it.
It looks like a robot man, a bit like Mega Man does, just orange. So everything is orange, but there's like a round circle that like leaves out room for the face to look out of it. And it looks really angry to the side. It gives someone the side eye. Mm-hmm. And its chest can kind of like open up like you said, like a drawer or something, and there's books in it, I think. And
yes.
It looks really mad. And I think you can move the arms, right?
It looks like maybe you could move the arms. I'm not sure about that. But it's very much in his style to create this functional thing where you can store stuff in it, but then you have to figure out how to fit like a gigantic orange spaceman in your house. I love it. It's so him.
Is this already referencing the episode? Are we doing a Mega Man episode?
We are not doing a Mega Man episode.
Because it really does look a bit like Mega Man.
It does look like Mega Man. Okay. So he finishes up art school. He starts looking for a job. He puts his focus on entering the video game industry because he thinks he might be able to make some money from it. And also, I don't know that I explicitly said this, but it would, this is kind of implied, but it would increase the chances people would be able to experience his art, right? It's not just going to be at some museum. You're going to be able to experience it. Okay.
Yeah.
Quote, making things was more fun than just playing video games that someone else had made. I knew that video games were a very popular entertainment in the world. You can buy games from game shops in any country. That is easier than going to an art museum. And video games are a medium that have a strong and intuitive interactivity more than anything else. I still think that the interactivity of video games is kind of a miracle. Here's another quote about the same kind of stuff. I was thinking after graduating, what can I do? I didn't want to be an artist. Art, that's useless, an unnecessary job. By the way, he says this in almost every interview. At the same time, I wanted to make people smile, to make them happy. I just remembered when I was playing video games when I was a kid, they make people smile. And also, it's a worldwide business. If I was to be a sculptor, make an object, other people from other countries come to Japan to see my object. But a video game, you can get it anywhere. And that's a great thing. I thought, video games, there's no more trash bin. If I make a 3D object, there's plastic and metal. With video games, you just need electricity and a monitor. It's so clean. So this is how he's made his decision.
Yeah, and electricity comes out of thin air. That's how it works.
It does.
Yeah.
Oh, you're killing me, Dachz. Okay, so he had played a bunch of games growing up. He really liked the Nintendo classics. I read some stuff where he said he really liked Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. He'd like level up his characters, you know, that kind of young play an RPG for the first time obsession. But he really liked old Namco games.
What are
specifically like old Namco arcade games?
What are examples of old Namco games? Were they already into fighting games? Was that a thing?
So things like just I just pulled up a list because there's so many, like Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Xevious.
Oh man, I love Dig Dug. I played Dig Dug in an arcade hall like a few months ago, and that was like, I had so much fun. Dig Dug.
Yeah.
Nice, cool, Namco.
So
yeah, I'm into it.
That's the kind of stuff he's looking at. And I suppose by then, I guess Tekken 3 would have been out by then. They would have been into fighting games because this is 1999 and Tekken 3 came out in 1997. So yeah.
So Bandai and Namco were already together, right?
They were not together yet. That will come up later in this episode.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a pivotal thing. Okay. So he interviews at Namco. To get into Namco, he had to do 3 things. First, he had to submit a portfolio of his work and do a small drawing test. He sent them stuff that he had worked on in art school. From there, he had to be interviewed by the company's senior artists. And one thing, he goes in this interview and he mentions to them that he doesn't understand why Namco is just like making the games that they are. The games that they were making in the modern, the time he was interviewing, were not like the games of old, right? The things he liked about Namco. It was a lot of sequels. It was a lot of over-engineered stuff. He's like, why aren't you guys going back to the old stuff that was really good? Okay. And some people in this interview agree with him, but he makes it to the 3rd step, the final step, an interview with Namco's executives, and he hits a wall. They don't like him, and he does not make it past the interview. They reject him for the job. Now, that could have been the end of the story.
So we know of no crazy dictator that came off of this, so it's not a artist gets rejected from art school story. So where are we going now?
That took me a second. One of the artists that he had interviewed with in the 2nd step liked him so much that artist went to the executives and convinced the executives to give Keita a job. And that is how Keita Takahashi started working at Namco.
So he got rejected, and then they took him anyway.
They took him anyway. He got a rejection. They said, you didn't make it through. And this artist went to bat for Keita. And Keita asks him, why? Why did you do this for me? And the guy says, you looked very unique. And I felt that there was potential to make something fun with you.
I mean, that's probably
so he gets it in.
Often a reason to collaborate with someone, right? Am I gonna enjoy working with this person? And then I will try to probably further his career if I get the opportunity.
Right.
So it was luck. Nice.
It was total luck. So he gets into Namco, and they put him into
not only luck, but also the persistence, because he always tried his best. He wouldn't have had the luck if he wouldn't have tried his best at any given moment.
I would agree. And also, Keita Takahashi, as you'll see throughout this story, is very much the kind of person that does not compromise who he is. He is very much, he has visions and he sticks with them. And I think that for better or for worse. And so he very much went in and unapologetically was himself, and someone respected that.
Well, you got to respect that.
Yep. And so that was cool. So he gets this job at Namco. They put him into a 6-month training school at the company that would teach him the basics. And now this is kind of a story for another time that we don't need to dig into, but Namco picked this model up from Konami. And Konami had a lot of success like training talent in-house because there was like they were seeing success with like you would bring people in and you would train them in-house and then they would work for you. And so they knew how all of your systems worked instead of trying to get talent from other places. You were creating your own talent from within.
You have integrated people into your system, which,
right.
This sounds perfect.
Yep. Yeah. So Namco had been seeing, there was a bit of a dip in the Japanese gaming industry at this time, late 90s, early 2000s. And Namco is like, profits are going down. Let's make our own training program. This is what Keita starts in. And this turns out to be really good for him because he's an artist, right? He does not have the skills he needs to make games. So he's learning things like...
He's not a math lover. No.
Nope, he's not a math lover. His mom is so sad. He's learning things like 3D modeling, texture mapping. They put him in an actual arcade where he works for a couple of months. He gets to work with all the staff, learn all this stuff that's like directly applicable to his job. He also uses a Silicon Graphics workstation, which is something we've brought up like 7 times in this podcast because they were like top of the line graphics stuff.
That was like the most like high performing graphical workstation there was, right? The PlayStation guys used those too, right?
Yeah.
And weren't they used for Jurassic Park and stuff like that?
They were. I think maybe it was Crash Bandicoot. We talked about this. We did that episode years ago. So
yeah.
I'd have to go back and double check. But anyway, they've been around for a while. Every time I see them, I think of that. But so then at the end of the 6-month program, he creates a mini game. He works with an engineer. They create a mini game to test his skills. So the game he makes is called Midnight Justice. You play as bank robbers driving a car, and they are trying to escape from a giant police robot that is chasing them. And you're playing as the bank robbers, and you have to dodge obstacles, but then you also have to make time to turn around and fire missiles at this robot that's firing at you. And he says, quote, "The biggest point of that game was the camera and game view. I wanted to show a police robot that chases you from behind. So the car the bank robbers are driving and the police robot are facing are coming toward the camera like one of the levels in Crash Bandicoot."
You know, my true goal in life is basically to unite all human beings in the happiness of shooting the police. So that's basic. And I'm glad that in his first game he identified this unifying aspect of humanity, I guess.
Once we destroy the gigantic police robot, there will be no more wars.
Yeah. I see.
Okay. So after he finishes his training in Midnight Justice, most of the people he trained with got assigned to other projects, like existing projects that were already going on. But Takahashi was given something different. His boss remembered that Keita had expressed an interest in making fun and weird experimental stuff, and he agrees with Keita about the current state of games being made at Namco. He's like, listen, I get what you're saying. So knowing that Keita Takahashi does not fit this particular mold, he assigns him to a prototype project. Quote, "My boss wanted me to think of a new game idea, but if I joined a big project, it would take a long time to finish. So he picks a small prototype project for me so I could think about a new game while I'm working. And such a small project was a good opportunity to work with veterans, and I learned a lot. So we'll skim over this a little bit, but he got put on this like arcade machine that was like a photo booth. You ever done like a photo booth, Dachz, where you go in and you like pay or something and it'll take 4 pictures of you or something? It was like that, but you could like edit it and you could put little stickers on it and stuff. It was very...
Ooh, nice.
Late 90s, early 2000s. But the project gets canceled. So again, he's sort of back in the wind. What's he going to do? All the other students are out doing things. They put him onto a different project. Okay. And they were trying to come up with a game, and he gets moved to this project called Action Drive. Action Drive. The designer of the game wanted Action Drive to be a spy game. Okay. And Takahashi is brought on to create some assets for the game. But as he starts working on it, he and the senior artists of the game are like, this game is dreadfully boring. It's just terrible. So what if we came up with a bunch of weird and wacky shit to shake up Action Drive? Takahashi comes up with this. My idea was, the queen of the cosmos was kidnapped by bad guys on Earth. The king of the cosmos wants to help her, but he is lazy, so he lets his son go help her instead. The obvious problem is that the prince of the cosmos is smaller than human beings, so he has to use his hammer-shaped head to hit the heads of people driving by, and then he hacks that human by sticking a small steering wheel on top of their heads while they are stunned. Okay.
What?
Okay, just to review.
I think I know this game. I just can't think of the name right now.
We'll get there. So he has all these ideas. Okay, so there's this prince. His sort of shitty father sends him to go rescue his mom, and he hacks into people. He smashes them with his hammerhead, and he hacks into them with this thing, and then he drives them around, and he can put them in cars too and make them drive cars. And he has all these ideas that go along with this, like, this would give you an excuse to drive around like a maniac because you're an alien and you don't understand driving laws. And he also thought it would be funny if the King of Cosmos would give like random objectives and like that like weren't good ones, or like advice that sucked. Like, oh, you should go that way, and then you go that way. And he's like, I guess that was wrong, right? Just to kind of fuck with you. Crazy objectives didn't make sense.
Is this the Katamari Damacy episode?
This is the Katamari Damacy episode.
Oh, nice.
Does it all track, right? Weird artist wants to make weird things. Yeah.
Now that I think of it, nobody else could have created this game but the person that you have just described to me. It makes absolute sense.
Yep. So he's like, this is great. And he presents all of this to the designer. And the designer is like, no way. No, we're not doing that at all.
Imagine you were pitching Katamari Damacy to anyone, and what must their reaction be? It must do, what the fuck have you been doing?
Yeah. Well,
we
so this
want
guy
to
is
sell
basically
this
like,
to people, right? You know that.
well, one thing that you will see throughout this episode is that Keita Takahashi often makes ideas for games that conflict with selling them.
Yeah.
Because he's an artist and he wants to make art. But, okay. So this guy is like, hey, that's all well and good, but we're not going to do that. But maybe what you should do is take the characters that you made and save them for when you make a different game someday. So...
Why don't you... Okay, I really appreciate this work, but why don't you take all of the stuff that you did and fuck right off? Like, right now. There's the door. Just go.
So he does. He fucks right off, and he saves all those characters for a different game.
Thankfully,
which this is, as we're getting ahead of ourselves. This is why in Katamari Damacy, all the characters from the Cosmos have hammerheads.
Yeah,
because it is the original designs from Action Drive.
Once you said that, I knew the game.
Yep. Not long after this, Action Drive is canceled. Sucks to suck, buddy. And Takahashi, yet again, needs a new project. Guy cannot catch a break, right? He talks to his boss about how everyone he's trained with has worked on projects by now. What should he do next? Should he just do like another sequel to a game, right? Like if he just does something boring, maybe, that'll get some games under his belt and they know it's going to release, there's always going to be like Tekken 8 or whatever. But then start talking and he's like, what if you, like, maybe this is a time when you make your own game. Maybe this is it, right? And this is what his boss decides on. Keita should really think about making his own game. And so as he tells it, he like worked on some little stuff in Namco. He didn't like have like time set aside that's just like, oh, this is my sit aside to make a game time, right? It was just he's doing stuff and he's thinking of ideas. But of course, coming up with a new idea can be hard. Quote, I was and am looking for the ideas that only video games can do and only I can do, and something new. Of course, I might be able to think about a fantastic soccer game, or a new car racing game, or an ambitious shooter, but other developers have made those. Also, I wanted to make a game that makes people smile, like the sculptures I had done in university. So, finding a nice game idea is hard for me, even now. So how does he arrive at Katamari?
I was going to say, if any game is going to make you smile, it's Katamari Damacy. So that's completely right.
It is. Yep. Okay, so where did all this come from? He had seen the prototype for a game by Sony called Densen, which means power line in Japanese. It was this cute little prototype game about a young girl who would take this like coat hanger and glide around on power lines through town, which sounds really cute, but the more I think about that, that's probably a terrible health hazard. But he was struck by this, just take this piece of metal and glide around on electricity. That's sure. But he was struck by this game because it didn't have any violence. It didn't have a power fantasy. And he really liked that it was like small changes to the real and ordinary world to make it interesting. Like this idea that you didn't have to go to a fantasy world. You could just play in the real world. So that sticks with him. And apparently Densen never released, but it did plant some ideas in his head. And one was a big one, like I said, that you could make a game that didn't have like combat or violence or things like that. Another thing churning around in his brain is something called undokai, which are days in which elementary school students in Japan, they do like this big thing where they all work together as teams to compete against each other, and all their friends and family come to watch. It's like kind of a big fun thing for students. One of those games involves pushing around a giant ball until it lands in a goal. And so he's on his commute to work. I think it was to work or from work. It doesn't matter. He's commuting from work. And he's walking to the train, and he has all this stuff kicking around in his head, and suddenly he starts visualizing something spinning, collecting things in itself and growing bigger and bigger. And by the time he had finished his train ride, he has an idea for a game. The next evening, he goes and has dinner with a friend who is a game designer at Namco. And Keita would pitch this guy ideas because sometimes Keita felt like an outsider, right? Like he wants to make a game, but he's just really an artist. And, he'd pitch him goofy stuff and they'd laugh about it and go, oh yeah, haha. But this time the guy goes, wow, Keita, this is a game. So Keita goes to work the next day and he goes to his boss with this idea. He says that his boss understood it immediately. Keita suggests he could reuse the characters from Action Drive that were already made. Quote, the prince is so small that you can start this game from a very small level and get to a big one. And the king of Cosmos is just crazy. It was a perfect match. And my boss said, good job, Takahashi-kun. You made it finally. I know it was just an idea and not actually a game yet, but we were on the same page already.
You know why his boss also liked it? Because his boss in his mind always calculates how much money the stupid design phase of a game design costs. And he was like, this is already done. So you kind of saved me like a quarter of the budget for this game. So we're very likely going to make a profit on this. Yeah, this is a great idea. I'm into it.
Oh, we'll talk about some budget saving mechanisms here. Okay, but here's a big problem we're going to hit another wall here. And that is that Takahashi was an artist, not a game designer. And due to how Namco is structured, he had no formal pathways within the company to pitch a game to the higher-ups. Like, he couldn't just go to the higher-ups and pitch a game. And that sort of rigid structure within Japanese companies is actually pretty common in a lot of companies. Even still today, some companies operate like this, that this formal structure is very rigid. Quote, I talked with Mitsuyoshi Ozakai-san, my boss, about how we should move this idea forward to an actual internal production. Usually game ideas were proposed from the game design department at Namco, but we both worked in the art department. Also, technically, Ozakai-san was not my actual boss at the time. He had moved to another department. So I talked to my current boss about my idea first, but he was not a manager of game designers. He was a manager of artists. He seemed to not have a bad impression of the idea, but he couldn't make a decision about the game itself. So he's going around, he's talking to all these people. No one knows how to actually pitch this. Ozakai, I guess Takahashi's former boss, had this idea, though. There was something going on at the company at this time. Remember I talked about how they were trying to train people in-house? They had put together a course called the Namco Digital Hollywood Game Lab, which would bring in instructors from the company and teach them how to make games for the PlayStation 2. Some of the instructors there had worked on Soul Calibur, they had worked on Tekken, they were sort of like veterans from the company. The students in the course had been learning how to make graphics, but they needed a project to collaborate on, something simple that they could all work on together. Takahashi's boss was really into the idea for this game and talks the school into picking their idea for the game to work on, because they're like, if this is a game about a ball rolling things up, the students could work on simplistic different objects that could exist in the world to be rolled up. Good fit, right?
Yeah, nice. And cheap, too.
And very cheap. See? Yeah. And so I don't have info on this, and I'm not actually sure when they picked the name Katamari, but they name it Katamari Damacy, or Katamari Damacy in other places. So I'll just start calling it from now on. And for those who are curious, Katamari can translate to something like clump, clod, or lump. Okay. Damacy translates into something like spirit or soul. So you could call it like clump of soul, right? Is kind of like how that translates, like clump soul or clump of soul.
Yeah. My clump, my clump, my clump, my clump, my lovely soul-y clumps.
Yeah. So. Keita says that name just popped into his head, and that's what he went with.
Cool.
So, okay. So they're putting together a team, and they're trying to figure out where the fuck they're going to get people for this team. And they're trying to cobble together this team from like literally anybody who will work on this project. So they have 11 students from the course, but they're like, okay, we need like actual game designers with experience. So they ask around in different departments, can anybody participate? Almost everybody says no. And then apparently the department that made Namco's arcade games decided to lay off a bunch of mechanical engineers. And Keita's team goes to them and says, okay, would you rather be fired from Namco, or would you rather work on this weird game with us? And so they all came on board, and they joined the Katamari team. So they get 3 programmers from Namco's arcade machine department and 3 visual designers. And then they set this goal that they want the game to be playable by the upcoming Japan Media Arts Festival. So they set this little deadline for themselves. It's in like 6 months. They put together a working prototype. It hits. Everything's great. We've got a prototype of the game. Everybody's happy. Okay. So they have this prototype. What do they do with it? Well, all of this is happening on the backdrop of the console wars that we've talked about in previous episodes, yep. Right? Although this is a little like later into those console wars than what I covered in my stuff. The next generation of consoles is on the horizon. The PS2 hardware, based entirely around running 3D games, was tempting to the team, but Sony's documentation at this time, to put it succinctly, really sucked. And there weren't a lot of people that they needed on the team at the time. So they see the GameCube's coming out. It has this developer-friendly kit. They're on a time crunch. They use the GameCube platform. Now, if you've played Katamari, you know later it came up on the PS2. We'll talk about that later. But originally they start with the GameCube. They have this prototype ready. What do? They have to make a full game. And suddenly now, it's not just making this fun little thing to take to an art show. Keita is now thrust into the role, having gone from being an artist to managing a team of people as a director. He has to learn this entirely new skill set on the fly. I bet that was like really scary. To talk about the mechanics of the game. Since I don't know that we overtly spoke about how this game actually works.
Let's explain Katamari to people. It's because it's important to explain this, because it's really, you can't compare it to a lot of things.
Yeah, it just kind of is what it is. So, okay, you start off as this little guy, the prince of all cosmos. He's this little green guy with this like hammerhead, and he is standing in front of a ball, and the ball has these little like bumps on it. Okay, these weird little bumps on it. And what you do is you roll over stuff with the ball, and it will stick to the ball, okay? So you start off picking up very small things, right? Like pencil erasers and like, weird little pieces of paper or whatever, candy wrappers, just things that are small enough to stick to the ball. And so like the first level is like a Japanese home, so there's all these little things about, thumbtacks and erasers, like I said, paper clips, pieces of junk. You find things that are bigger than you, and then if you bump into them or they bump into you, they'll knock you around. And so you have to sort of strategically figure out what you want to roll over to get bigger and bigger. And there's like generally like this little alarm that will go off if like a critter is going to smack into you or something. Because if you get hit, stuff will fly off your Katamari. So strategy there. You can see larger items around. which incentivizes you to roll them up because just about everything in the game can be rolled up. And you start picking up larger and larger items, and suddenly you're picking up chairs, and suddenly you're picking up cars, and suddenly you're picking up houses, and suddenly you're picking up continents, and the game just spirals out of control, right? And that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
And
the music is really nice too.
Oh, we're going to talk about the music. I think it's my favorite part of the game. Every object you pick up, it tells you what it is in the corner, and it adds it to an encyclopedia so you can look through them later if you want. Mechanically, one thing that I found noteworthy is that when you get large enough, the game will like pause for a second and the camera will zoom out so that you can see the ball better. Apparently, some of that was just due to like technical limitations. They would phase new items into the game and then phase old items out. So things that were too small would just get phased out and disappear. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, some levels you start getting big enough to roll up like screaming people and buildings and all kinds of stuff. Larger and larger you roll the ball, bigger and bigger. Can you get it big enough before the time limit? Go, go, go. It's just like intoxicating, right? And as you get bigger and bigger, they tell you in the game like, oh, this is how your Katamari compares to other stuff. Like your Katamari is the size of 850 ballpoint pens or 6 townhouses or whatever. It's just so fucking fun, right? Like it's so fun. And when you finish a level, to those who haven't played, your father, the king of all cosmos, who is kind of like, what if like Technicolor Freddie Mercury with a hammerhead comes to talk to you. He opens his mouth and a giant rainbow spews out. Oh, he's nuts. Absolutely nuts. He will inspect your Katamari. He will grade it based on his criteria for that level. And I will say that like one good thing I liked about that all is that like if you fuck up, you don't finish the level correctly, the only thing that happens is he scolds you and is like a real shithead, but you don't lose progress or something like that. Even the title screen was genius because it shows you how the mechanics of the game work before you even start it. The prince is standing in front of his Katamari. In front of him is the Namco logo. It shows you on the screen how to maneuver the ball. And to start the game, you have to roll over the Namco logo and pick it up. You already know how to play the game before you've even started it, right? It's like the entire mechanic right there. Genius.
Yeah, it's pretty basic, right? And from what I've seen, seems incredibly fun. I've played similar games, but I've actually never played Katamari.
Oh, you've never played Katamari?
I've seen footage and I know what it looks like, and I love the music. I have a playlist saved on Spotify that is just Katamari music because I like the music so much, but I've never played it. But around the same time, there was a lot of similar games that had this whole suck up small things to get bigger mechanic. I
would say that I don't know for sure, but it could be that some of those were in response to how big of a hit
that is very likely.
Yeah. As you said, we couldn't really talk about Katamari Damacy without talking about the music. The sound director was a man named Yu Miyake, who was a man that Keita had worked on previous projects with. And one of those projects was a video project called Texas 2000. I don't know much about it, but that's where they worked together. And Keita was so impressed with Yu Miyake's sound work that when it came time to pick a sound director, he was like, this guy. I want this guy. And Miyake had a specific vision for what the sound design would be like. One major theme throughout the game is the usage of humming. He said in an interview that people tend to remember the music from old games more than newer ones, and that a certain tune might make them remember the game. So to sum it up better, he thought that like earlier games had catchier tunes. Things would get stuck in your head and you'd hum them, right? Like think Tetris, think Mario, think Zelda. Like some of like you can hear that little clip and know it instantly, right?
Yeah, probably. You probably just have to hear the first 3 notes and you already know what you're listening to.
Right. So, for those of you who have never played Katamari, there's this humming on the intro track. Do you want me to do it? It goes, no 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 Katamari Damacy, no 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 Katamari Damacy, bum 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 dude. I won't do the whole song.
Orchestral versions of that. It's so cool.
Oh, it's so good. And like the intro,
there's jazz variations of it. Like there's so much music was spawned just in reference of this. That is so amazing.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can literally just go na 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 na, and you immediately know it's Katamari, and that was purposeful. That was purposeful to make a catchy tune that was associated with that game, instantly recognizable. So to make the rest of the music for the game, they brought on several composers who had worked within Namco, including those who had worked on some of their fighting games. But one person that I want to point out in particular is named Asuka Sakai. She was a composer who had worked on several video games up until this point, and she had done some work for Namco too, I believe. Why is she important to the story? Well, because Keita Takahashi married her.
Whoa.
I was never able to... Yeah, right? I was never able to figure out how, like, what the turn of events there was. One source suggested that they got married before Katamari was a thing, like maybe they knew each other from Namco. I don't know for sure, but...
Well, if it's Japanese company culture, they were working in the same project and were already a couple, and then after getting light financial success, their boss allowed them to get married, and then they got married.
I truly have no idea. But I wanted to point it out because she will come up throughout the story a few times, and that is how they sort of knew each other.
Cool.
And she worked on Katamari, composing the music, some of it. Okay, to create the music for the game, they hired 10 famous Japanese vocalists. The team at Namco wrote a bunch of songs and then gave each of the singers loose guidelines and then had the vocalists sing over them. They tried very hard to get a broad spectrum of different singers so that there would be singers from different generations, and they wanted broad appeal from the music, so they generally found artists that had not had hit songs for a while. So you have this weird mishmash of all these singers and even like anime voice actors who are all very talented, but just had not been heard from in a while. And so once they signed on individual vocalists, then they developed songs for those individual people to fit their style. And so it was very much created with the purpose of making Katamari music, not like taking outside influences, so to speak. There were no singers from outside of Japan because at this time they did not expect the game to make it from overseas. But they were like, you're going to have to listen to these songs like a lot. So they stayed away from trendy musical styles. They wanted sort of tried and true stuff. So you end up with, you know, jazz and samba and like light techno. It's a very unique blend. And I know it's like I'm spending a lot of time on the music, but I truly think that Katamari would not be the game it was without the music. It is just so iconic.
I can imagine it.
It's also just weird and jazzy.
Also, you can listen to it endlessly. I think what you just said fits perfectly. It's just something you'd probably get annoyed of it, but it takes a long time. I'm very resistant to getting annoyed by music, but I think still it's amazing music.
It really is. Yeah. Okay. So they end up meeting that deadline. Like I said, they demo the game at the Japan Media Arts Festival. It's a hit. Everybody loves it. And because of this, within Namco, excitement builds. The students are happy. The developers are happy. The team does a presentation to the company internally. The employees like it. His old boss, Ozakai, starts meeting with executives in the company and mapping out a release, and they decide on this deal. The game would get a budget. It would get a full release from Namco, but it would not be developed for the GameCube. It instead would release on the PS2. Keita was happy with this anyway because he liked that the sticks were next to each other on the PlayStation controller. I agree, it plays way better that way. He would get a budget of around 100 million yen, which was something like, depending on the currency conversion, somewhere between $650,000 to $800,000, depending on the time frame. And full production would take place in 2001. Also, as part of this deal, they decide he's going to have to work with an outside development company called Now Production. Keita agrees, but he starts to worry because now he's letting this outside company in on his vision, right? He starts splitting his time between Namco's headquarters in Tokyo and Now Production's offices in Osaka, which is about a 2-hour bullet train ride. It was through this outside company where most of the development of Katamari would occur, and Keita oversaw both teams. Keita spent about 90% of his time in Osaka and then would come back to Tokyo every 3 weeks. And it turns out he really ends up enjoying working with these people, and it all goes fine. So sometimes in these things where they're like, oh no, this outside group's going to come in and ruin my thing, it did not go that way. It worked out perfectly.
I still understand it. Like, he has this baby, and he so much of it is his design and him, and I would fear. I would fear the moment as well, where I would have to give my baby to someone else and be like, please don't ruin this. Please don't make this different than it's supposed to be, because it can happen so quickly.
It really can. And I think we'll gloss over some stuff I had on this, but, to that point, he very much had to learn as a producer here of this game to be in charge, to stick to his vision regardless of what other people wanted. And so, some people thought the idea of rolling stuff up was too simple. What if we added in this other mechanic? Or what if we added in all this extra collectible stuff and all these other mechanics? And he's like, no, modern games are bloated. They're overcomplicated. Fuck all of you. We're going to do what we want. I'm going to make this thing I set out to do. And management, you can fuck off. All these weird team members, you can fuck off. I'm making this game how I want it. And he stuck to that.
Nice. Good for him.
In September of 2003, the game debuts for the first time at the Tokyo Game Show. It was a single level demo that was available to the public. Apparently, the feedback was very positive. Now, before we move on to talk about the Tokyo Game Show, I want to note there's some weird reporting errors here. I have my pet theory of how this went. It's kind of irrelevant either way, but just when you look at this particular event, which is important, there's some discrepancies. So at the show, some Americans saw the game and enjoyed it, and they called it the rolling game. In one version of the story, one person in there in particular was there to see Takahashi, and her name is Robin Haneke. She was a game designer at Northwestern University, and she was part of what was called the International Game Developers Association. In one version, and I don't know if this is a reporting error or something, it is claimed she met Takahashi while she was in grad school, and some other way. How that happened was unclear, and that they had become friends, and that she had come to the show specifically to see him when she found out he was making something. Yeah. Okay? In another version, it said that she came to scout out people for this game developers conference. Either way, she ends up at the show. Okay. She had been reading up on in this version, she had been reading up on what they were calling the Dung Beetle game and wanted to try it out. And she describes finding the Namco booth. Quote, "It was this tiny little screen in a wall with this little shelf controller, and there was some stuff around it in Japanese. I picked up the controller and I was like, this is the greatest thing that I have ever seen in my life." So she and others from the group she was with had decided they wanted Keita to come to the 2004 Games Developer Conference in San Francisco. Specifically, Haneke was an organizer for the developer workshops at GDC and wanted to show Katamari Damacy at the experimental games workshop at the conference that year. So we want you to come to this conference. We want you to be in this experimental thing. And basically how that worked was all these designers would show off weird and new, groundbreaking ideas. So however she first meets him, it doesn't matter, but she's impressed by the game and ends up asking Namco, can Keita come and do this thing? Hey Namco, can Keita come out to play in the United States? And that's really weird at the time because this is the early 2000s and Japanese game developers didn't really do this, right? They didn't really have events where they would just go and talk about design.
Yeah.
But Namco's
you can make games, right? Go back into your basement and make more games.
Back to the pit. Namco, however, agrees, and we will come back to this. Now, Sony is really thrilled with how this is all playing out, and they apparently really liked Katamari, so they pushed for an earlier release date than had been planned. In return, they say, if you can do this earlier, we will help you with all of the advertising for the game. Okay? The hope was that they would get a boost in sales. Everybody would be happy. Sony would pad their fiscal numbers. Katamari would get a better release. And advertise they did. There were billboards. There were posters. Stores had demo discs. There was even a TV ad that became pretty popular, and I'm going to send it to you right now because it's very quick. And I want you to tell me what happens in this commercial.
Let me watch it.
Okay? It's very quick.
I didn't know that. Okay, it's basically a very grey office building, and a woman says something to a man, and then he says something like, yes, I'm going to get up, and then he stands up, but instead of standing up, basically the couch he's sitting on is attached to him, and he starts rolling forward with the couch, and then the next couch and the woman attached to him, and then they roll out of the room into the next room, and they basically turn into a Katamari. And then the Katamari music starts humming. Yeah, that was really funny. Good ad, really good ad.
Really good ad. Tells you everything that you need to know in 15 seconds, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect.
And it really catches you.
Okay.
It really, catches you off guard.
It's so, right? It's like perfect. So the game finally releases in Japan on March 18th, 2004. It sells around 35,000 copies in the first week. Part of this was that the game only cost 4,000 yen, which is about 2/3 of the price of a new game there at the time. So it's cheaper than other games. Not long after the release, in that same month, Keita shows up at GDC to give the presentation that I mentioned earlier. He walks out on stage with a shirt that says "Rock and Roll" in all caps. He shows them how you roll up the Namco logo. He shows them an insane opening video where they're playing that music and it just gets increasingly louder, and they're singing animals, and the King of Cosmos is flying around, and there's fucking rainbows and shit. He shows them how to roll up items, and the crowd just laughs and laughs. It's a huge hit. And here's a quote from the Boss Fight Games book that I used for a lot of sourcing of this episode. Quote, Darius Kazemi was in the audience that day. He wrote that, quote, the feeling in that room when Keita showed Katamari was just electric. It was amazing to see all these game developers, literally the best of the best in the world, in complete awe of this weird little game. At the end of the presentation, when he said that there were no plans to port it to the US market, everyone was just devastated.
No. Oh, yeah, he hypes them up, and then he stabs them into the heart. Oh, by the way, you're never going to play it, so go fuck you. And then he walks off stage, middle fingers raised, backwards.
Yep. The man in the rock and roll t-shirt hurt me that day. At the show itself, people get to play the game. The room is packed. It is standing room only, and people lined up to play the game. It was so different than everything else that was there. Because, remember, this is the early 2000s. What was coming out in the early 2000s? Multiplayer shooters.
Yeah.
And so then suddenly, American audiences get this fucking weird game where you roll shit up. It's colorful. It's funny. The characters in the game look like blocky toys, right? Like, it's so
fresh air. And I think I now really get the reference that he said in the beginning, that he was missing the olden days of Namco, because Katamari feels like one of those old games. It feels like Dig Dug. It absolutely does. And I really now I appreciate this connection, because it makes absolute sense. And I think that must have felt really refreshing in this endless swamp that we'll still live in, of every year another shooter that's just the same.
Oh boy, Madden's coming out. And you know, what's interesting too about that is, it's, how do I put this? You know, if people didn't buy Madden wouldn't exist, right? It's like, I'm friends with a wine sommelier. Dave, if you're listening to this, yes, I'm talking about you. And you know, we always talk about how, like, shitty wine, to our taste, right? Shitty wine exists, but people still buy it, and they like it, and they keep purchasing it. It's the most purchased wine, like box wine, low tier stuff. People buy it. So who are we to say that they shouldn't enjoy that? Who am I to say that someone shouldn't enjoy Madden or the new Call of Duty or whatever? But that being said, I was in a GameStop killing some time a couple of weeks ago, and a woman walked in and said, I want to buy a new PlayStation. And they said, sure. And they said, do you want a game to go with it? And she said, what's the newest Madden there is? And that's the only game that my husband wants. And I died a little bit inside. But hey, maybe he's out there having a fucking blast, right? Like, but for me, I want the Katamaris of the world. I want the weird shit.
Imagining buying a machine like the newest PlayStation only to play Madden. I'm holding back tears. It's really tough. It's really tough to talk about this. But there's people that could make more use of this machine. People could mine crypto with it, and it would be better use than playing Madden. No, nothing.
We'll get through this, buddy.
I hate American football. Like if like there's many bad things that America did, but if there's one thing that is truly evil and should be illegal and punished, it's American football.
Also, can we just totally have an aside? So like I'm staying with my in-laws right now, and they love football, right? And they're always like, "Hey, do you want to come watch football with us?" I'm like, "No." Right? And Andrea was telling them, she's like, "I don't know that I have met a person in the world who is less interested in sports than Tyler is." And I was just like, I understand from like a sociological standpoint, like why they exist and why people like them. I'm not going to shit on people who like them, but they're just not for me.
So
right?
it's Super Bowl
interested.
season, right? And in Germany, that's a thing now too. Germans now also watch the Super Bowl. And when that started in Germany, a friend of mine asked me to watch with them, and I was like, okay, I've never watched a football game. I'm going to watch that. And that was painful. But I sat through it, and I tried to understand what was going on, but I didn't.
Did you enjoy 10 minutes of football each hour and 50 minutes of ads? Because that's basically what
ads,
it
and
is
then
now.
there's so many breaks, and they say, why are we talking about football in this podcast? Can we carry on? Okay, Katamari Damacy is a wonderful game, and it's great that sometimes the video game industry produces such great products that show you that this medium is actually capable of producing innovative and new things that are truly enjoyable.
It's true. And because it was so, to get us back on track, because it was so novel, the media didn't even know how to write about it, right? Like they're calling it like the snowball simulator or the dung beetle simulator, but media buzz starts to add up. And because of this press reaction, Namco is like, maybe we'll release this to the United States and see how it goes, and then maybe we'll release it to the rest of the world. So that conference is why the world got access to Katamari. And so in Japan, the game has steady sales. It's in the top 10 games sold for 9 weeks. By the end of the 10th week, it had sold around 102,000 copies. And sales aren't exactly what Namco wants, but Takahashi is just like, man, I hope that we just recover the money we spent to make the game. Okay? So it releases in the United States on September 22nd, 2004. I had forgotten about this because I bought it when it was relevant. And it only cost $20. Which is insane for that time. At first, it's like kind of this sleeper hit until the reviews start coming out. One Eurogamer review described it as, quote, "It is the happiest game I have ever played, and the happiness is infectious." I think that really sums up Katamari.
Yeah, nice.
Copies start flying off the shelves. Retailers hadn't anticipated demand, and the game would sell out quickly. Sometimes they would stock the shelves and the game would be sold out within like a couple of hours. But still a niche game for a niche crowd. Growth is slow and steady. And this is jumping ahead a little, but by the October of the following year, the game had sold 300,000 copies in the US. But it starts winning awards. It's included in a list of Games in Time magazine. It gets awards from GDC. The G4 network gives them an award. All these art-related awards. The soundtrack is praised. It wins awards. Often, you'll see the Katamari soundtrack pop up as like, top 10 best game soundtracks of all time. It's on there. Time magazine called it one of the biggest cult hits in the history of video games. People started going to conferences and talking in speeches and presentations, talking about how this game was a complete experience. It did exactly what it set out to do and nothing else. It was simple. It was fun. It was accessible. It was just so different, and it blew everyone's minds.
What I really love about Katamari, and my wife once talked to me about this, that what she finds odd about video games is the constant violence featured within them. And at the time I was like, yeah, well, it's just part of it. But these days I can appreciate it much more, that making a game that is not basically built around this constant theme of violence and anger and hate actually makes me appreciate a game like Katamari much more. Which also applies to other games that basically manage to stay away from this constant stigma, actually, for the video game industry of having to portray violent themes. And this is something I really like about Katamari.
I totally agree. And, that was what he set out to do, and he did it, and it stuck. It didn't need... I mean, the whole idea of, like, I don't know, wrapping people up in a Katamari and burning them up into a star is still a little horrifying, but it's kind of like a dark humor.
It's magical
reality,
violent. Right? Because it's not... It's not like something you can actually grasp. It's obviously nonsense. So that's what it is. It's supposed to make you happy and chuckle because it's so silly. It is. So actually, and I was joking about the John Lennon thing and the Let It Be, all the world unites, but Katamari Damacy is a very good example of a piece of art that can actually be uniting in its silliness, because it's probably if you show it to lots of different people, they all understand it because it absolutely it requires no language to figure out what is going on. Because it's just nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. So I think it is a unifying game.
I showed it to I have some younger cousins who are much, much younger than me. And a few months ago, went on a trip and spent some time with them. And I showed them Katamari, and they just were like, oh, roll that up. Oh, that's so fun. Like they had never seen something like that before. It didn't keep their attention as much as Untitled Goose Game did, but they really liked it.
That game is also genius. Yeah,
it is. We'll talk about that game will come up in this podcast here in a second, interestingly. Okay, but Keita's floored. He's just like, oh my gosh, like I never thought that this is not a direct quote, but just like that it would become popular abroad as well. Like he's totally surprised. Okay, here's a fun little side story. Now you might expect that this weird little game with strange characters, unique style, it's very bright, merch everywhere, right? Like you'd see Katamari merch everywhere, but it didn't. Keita was very protective of the game and his designs, and he worried that merchandising might cheapen some of the charm. However, there's a little tech company called Panic based in Portland, Oregon that made software, but not video games. At a show in 2003, they had created a bunch of very stylish shirts for their company that you could buy for them that were like really cool for being like trade show swag, right? And the shirts began this hit, and they started selling them on their website. Someone who is friends with the co-founder, Cable Sasser, said that he thought it would be really fun for them to make tasteful Katamari shirts. So Sasser half-jokingly floats this idea to their only employee in Japan. His name was Nobuhiro Hasegawa. When they talk through this, Hasegawa thinks Sasser is being serious. Okay? Looks up the contact for Namco Japan, sets up a licensing meeting. Hasegawa meets with Takahashi himself, as well as some people from Namco, and gets permission to be the only producer of approved Katamari merchandise. Keita liked the parallels between his story and their company. He was a trained sculptor who was making video games. They were a tech company who wanted to make t-shirts.
Imagine the resolution.
It made sense to him.
The resolution of this cultural misunderstanding. Employer, I have now given you. I have provided us the opportunity to actually print the design that you have suggested to me. Let's start printing the new t-shirts. No, dude, this was a joke. I was just saying, like, one of my guys said, hey, we should probably print those video game shirts in a very stylish way. No, I have done this because you have asked me. This is not what we have agreed upon. then they have to print these shirts.
Does this contract look like a joke to you, sir?
Yes.
So they're like, okay, I guess we're fucking making t-shirts with Keita Takahashi. So Takahashi, they work with him. He makes most of the designs himself. I guess they like, this is not a direct quote, but I read somewhere that they'd just be like, oh, he'd just like send us like a shirt that just had a bear on it or something. And we'd be like, okay, right? Nothing to do with Katamari, but sure, dude, if that's what you want. They were sold on their website, and then they would like take a bunch of them and give them to Namco so they could sell them too. And while now you can find Katamari merchandise around if you look for it, that is a story how for a time, a tech company in Portland ended up getting exclusive rights to sell the only Katamari merchandise of it.
I must say that Katamari merch that has absolutely nothing to do with Katamari is just the most Katamari thing to do about Katamari.
Yep, isn't it? Also, we will mention Panic, the company, one more time in this episode later, so think on them. But Panic would go on to publish Untitled Goose Game.
Ooh, cool.
For real. Same company, right? With all this success, in December 2004, Namco announces Katamari is going to get a sequel, and it would come out the following spring. But there's an important caveat to this story. Keita Takahashi did not want to make another Katamari game. He was done. In his opinion, he didn't like sequels. The industry relied too much on sequels, not new, fun, creative ideas. He's like, this stifles...
That was his initial criticism of the industry, right? Don't just do everything again and again. Just do new things. And I understand. Katamari Damacy is its own thing. It does not need to be extended.
He's like, this stifles the creativity of game designers. I don't want to make a sequel. And Namco is just like, well, this game makes us money, and money is awesome. So they secretly start developing a new Katamari game without him. Behind the scenes, the sequel was going to be the exact same game, but Christmas themed. That's it. That was Katamari 2.
Yeah, that sounds like a money grab. Yeah, wow, nice.
Keita finds out about this.
What can we do to sell it to Americans? Let's roll up Christmas trees. Make it blue.
So Keita Takahashi discovers this, and he, as you might expect, is not pleased. He's like, no, I don't want to make this game.
I wouldn't be pleased, even if it wasn't Katamari that was ruined. Like, they're gonna sell the game as my game as a sequel, and it's just a Christmas version of it. Nice.
Namco's like, too bad we're doing it anyway. So he gets strong-armed. He has to make this choice. Do I let Namco make a fucking Christmas Katamari game, or do I involve myself in it and get some say? So he gets strong-armed in, and he agrees.
I know what he did.
He does it.
He does?
He agrees.
Does he agree?
He said in one interview that he didn't want to disappoint Katamari fans, so he's like, I guess I have to take part. So he directs a follow-up game, which was originally called Katamari Damacy 2, but would eventually be called We Love Katamari. Namco at the time wanted the game done quickly. We won't spend as much time on development of this. They put together a larger team. It peaks around 30 people at one point. And the plot of the game, the whole plot of the game, makes fun of what Keita Takahashi was going through. The king of all cosmos is surprised how much people love the prince and his Katamari rolling shit up. They have so many adoring fans. So he forces his son to go back to Earth to keep rolling shit up to make people happy. And then he forces all the prince's cousins to go do it too, which is how they integrated multiplayer. We have to give the fans what they want, Dachz. So the missions in the game are all like fucking crazy, absurd requests from fans, and when you go through to like, it'll like all these hands will go up like pick me, and when you pick a mission, like you literally pick a fan and take their request.
That is a very nice take on making a sequel actually interesting.
You roll around things different sometimes than a Katamari. So like in one level you roll up a sumo wrestler who needs to eat to get ready for a match, and you roll him into food so he can get big enough. There's one level where like your Katamari is on fire, and if you don't roll up things quickly enough it goes out. You might need to like make it as big as it can be with the smallest number of objects, or like I think there's one where it's like you're on a racetrack and your Katamari is just constantly moving and you have to steer it. But it added like a versus mode, it had a co-op multiplayer, it was chaotic, it was nuts. Both people are controlling the Katamari at the same time. It's nuts. And the game focused on leaning into fan service so much that when it released, the cover in Japan is just a whole bunch of Katamari fans standing outside of the Namco offices with like "We love Katamari" signs. In other countries it released, it was like a animated little thing of the prince peeking his head out of the door, and there's just all these fans outside of his house. Quote, "I wanted to do the stuff that we can only do in a sequel," says Takahashi. "I mean, there are many games that can't launch a sequel. A title named like We Love Katamari, a game based on fans, or the Japanese packaging, these would have all been impossible with a brand new game." And in another quote, "I suppose I'm forcing things a bit, but I thought I might try to connect the real world with the game world just a bit. Well, I suppose I wasn't completely successful, but by feeling closer to the game, I thought that the enjoyment from playing the game might be different, more familiar, more fun. Also, I thought that it would be kind of silly and fun to have a screen where you select missions, the fans raising their hands and saying, 'Pick me, me,' and then make requests to the king." The music again was great. Same guy came back to do it, Yu Miyake. Wanted the music to feel similar, but like maybe like a little more grown up. I think I think that it succeeds in that. It released in Japan in 2005, July 6th. It released in the United States on September 20th of that year, Europe the following February, which was interestingly the first Katamari in the European market. We Love Katamari was the first one to drop.
I came into contact with Katamari through the community around you. So I actually didn't know of Katamari before then. And I was always wondering if I just missed it as a kid.
You might
but apparently I didn't.
You would have been like, I guess what, like a mid-teen around that time, right? So yeah. Also, it was a really niche thing. If you didn't know about it, you wouldn't know about it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. Also of note, Namco released another Katamari game called Me and My Katamari for the PlayStation Portable on December 22nd of 2005. It was the first game in the series that Takahashi had no involvement in. The controls were different because the PSP only has one stick for movement. I remember, I think it was like in art class, I had a friend who showed it to me on his PSP, and I was not sure what to think about it. But I guess it did okay. And with the two games,
PSP and you play that? What the fuck is wrong with you? Get some Madden, dude.
Dude, did you fucking see Madden 2004? Dude, it has my favorite roster of big burly dudes who beat the shit out of each other and kick a ball around, dude. Dude, that was like the dream team when the Chicago Birdhawks were the best. And
let's not spend too much time on talking about Madden. No, I started it.
Football fans,
you don't have to say sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. You know, listen, you're allowed to have an opinion even if it's wrong. So anyway, these two games are finished. Keita is unhappy about the current state of Namco, especially after what they just did to him, right? And he starts thinking that all of their decisions are based around making money and not games, not good games. And he starts thinking about leaving. He had traveled all over the world meeting game designers and different gamers. And here is part of like how he spoke about that in an interview. Quote, "When I made Katamari, I was able to go abroad and everyone liked the game, and I was shown all these games that people made. I could really feel their passion, which I did not feel at all from the people at Namco." And the interviewer's like, "Oh, a passion for game creation?" He says, quote, "Right. They love games, and so they make them. So why do I have to make games for these Namco folks who are thinking about money? It was a waste of time. The world is so big. I thought I could make different games. That was the biggest reason." So he's getting very mad about Namco's focus on profits. And at this time, Namco had been in a pretty poor financial state, thus why they were probably thinking about making like fucking Katamari Christmas special or whatever. And with worries about the company, they looked for another company to merge with. First, they looked to Square Enix, thinking that it would be all three companies together, like Square Enix Namco. That didn't take. And then they tried Sega, but the Dreamcast was doing poorly at this time. And Sega is like, we're not really sure about Namco's financials here, so, And Sega
I think it sounded more like, I think we're dying. Why are we talking about
the Dreamcast is dead.
My heart just stopped beating. Can we release another Sonic?
Oh my gosh. Hey, how weird is it that the guy who made Sonic is in jail for like fraud? That was very strange.
Oh yeah.
That happened like
about that.
Yeah, very strange. Anyway, okay. So also Sega starts having talks with Namco about this, and Sega had been talking to this like pachinko company that they were going to merge with already, and this pachinko company is just fucking pissed that they're entertaining this deal with Namco, and so they pull out of their deal with Sega, and Sega's deal with Namco doesn't work either, and no one merges.
Whoa.
So in 2006, you mentioned this earlier in the episode, Namco ends up merging with a company called Bandai.
Yep.
Bandai brought a bunch of different IP licenses with them, including Gundam and, as we talked about in an earlier episode, Tamagotchi.
It basically, didn't it go like, I only roughly remembered because I researched it once, basically Bandai was dissolved and Namco just took all of the IPs and just kept the name for branding.
I think you might be right, but I don't have that in my notes. That sounds right, though.
I'd
Keita says
have to
that,
check sources too, but yeah, I think that's how it
sure.
went.
Keita says that there were a lot of internal politics at that time that were a real pain to deal with, and he was not happy about them. And there was discussion like, oh, we're going to get all these new, fantastic, valuable existing IPs, and that we're going to want to focus on those, not new and creative things like Keita wanted to do. Keita goes that year in 2006 to the first Game City Festival in Nottingham. It's a game festival that takes place over 5 days or so. The first year, he's asked to give a speech. And in that speech, he mentions something to the effect of wanting to build a playground someday, and that maybe he could do that in Nottingham. He mentions the playground thing again around this time to Time Magazine, saying, quote, "In 10 years' time, I am not going to be making games anymore. Quote, I would like to create a playground for children. A normal playground is flat, but I want an undulating one with bumps."
Undulating playgrounds. Health and safety loves undulating playgrounds.
We will definitely come back to this playground later. Okay. During this time, Keita starts getting this
but
sure.
The sentence, "The man that made Katamari Damacy went on to design a playground," sounds like, if you know what Katamari is, sounds like a very dangerous thing to do.
You would think, yeah. I promise you we'll talk about this playground. So during this time, he starts getting this reputation of being this really weird guy. Who'd have thought? He shows up to press conferences in like his bare feet. He avoids getting his picture taken. He very much breaks the Japanese norms and will directly tell you how he feels about things. He's just kind of a strange dude in some ways. I realized I've not actually shown you what he looks like. He looks like this. This is when he was working on something we'll talk about later.
I'm imagining him like a man that has a nose and also eyes. And that's what he actually looks like.
Yeah, here's a younger picture of him too.
So he's holding a prince.
He is holding a prince. Yeah, that was from the earlier days. Okay, so he very much breaks a lot of Japanese norms. He'll tell you directly how he feels about things. He's just kind of strange, and nobody knows how to take him. And then in 2007, the first look at Keita's next game for the PlayStation 3 is revealed at the Sony PlayStation Premiere event in Tokyo. The game would be called Nobi Nobi Boy. At the Bandai Namco press conference, Shin Ozunawa, the vice president of the company, comes out holding a silver stretchy hose with 2 pink balls stuck to the end. Here's the picture. Okay?
Yeah, it's like a dildo. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to show me this, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
Okay, it does kind of look like a double-sided dildo. I'll give you that. Reporters start asking him, "Is this a new controller peripheral?" And he laughs. I could just hear one reporter going, "What? Hey, is this controller gonna have haptics? Can you adjust this?"
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he laughs. He laughs and says, "Oh, this thing? No, it's not a controller. I just brought this as a visual aid to explain the game." He then plays a 30-second clip of a long worm creature with 4 legs just sort of doing stuff and wiggling around.
And he wants to demonstrate the mechanic with a real life thing. Okay, yeah.
He does. And that so everyone is like...
Sense,
still fucking talking. and so everyone is like, "Okay, so what the hell is this?" And he goes, Quote, Takahashi told me to keep my mouth shut and just show you this video. But yeah, that's... you fucking cute. But that's kind of hard considering there's 30 seconds of just this. The wriggling is done through advanced physical calculations. And according to Takahashi, this game wouldn't have been possible without the PS3. Takahashi was actually waiting for the PS3 release. Oh my god, I'm crying. But that was it. Nobody knew what the game was going to be. Okay, later that year, Takahashi is invited back to the Game City Festival to deliver the festival's vision statement for the year. The gist I get is that this is probably their keystone speaker. He shows off more of the game there and allows people to access a playable prototype. While it wasn't exactly a finished product at this time, I'll just give you the broad strokes of the game. The entire game revolves around the concept of stretching. There are two characters named Boy and...
It's
I'm trying so hard.
This is like if you're in a classroom in biology and say today we're going to talk about the penis. And Tyler was a little boy that would then, for the entirety of the 1.5 hours, sit in the back of the room and be like...
Well, yeah, because it's funny. You listen here. I keep laughing because every time I say something... I see Dachz's face and he smirks a little bit and I start getting the giggles again.
I just smirk because I enjoy this conversation. You smirk because you're
a juvenile.
Filthy, juvenile, rotten person that happens to also be on this podcast.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. I was definitely the one who said it looked like a dildo. It was definitely me who did that first.
Okay, let's get back. Okay. What did you say?
Okay. The entire game focuses around the concept of stretching. There are two characters named Boy and Girl. You play as Boy. That's the weird wiggle worm.
Nice, okay.
Boy, to explain to the rest of you, looks like a Technicolor worm creature with 4 legs. You control both the front and back half of Boy. The left stick moves his front half. The right stick moves his back half. If you move this... Dachz is trying so hard to serious up and he just can't. He's trying so hard. Okay. If you move the sticks in opposite directions, you can stretch him out, and that is how you accumulate points. Oh yeah, cool. Oh, cool, Tyler.
Do you have to untangle yourself, or is it about propelling yourself?
It is about making yourself as long as possible.
As long as possible. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And by stretching him out is how you accumulate points. They showed off a demonstration.
How did they ever pitch this to anyone without them dying?
Maybe that's what happened to Sega. This is the first time I have ever seen Dachz cry.
It's just a wholesome story. I just can't help it.
Here's a quote. Here's a quote by Keita Takahashi. Keita Takahashi. Stretching came first. Period. Maybe it's worth mentioning that the game was not single-handedly created by me. For the character of Boy, one of the staff members handed me a sketch, and I liked it, so we decided to go with it. I made a few minor modifications to the idea, but that was it. In terms of graphics, we had to find a way to make the character not look disgusting. We started out with puffballs attached to both ends of a string, but the long string for an abdomen made it look kind of gross.
Yeah, probably like a tapeworm or something. Yeah, but I mean, the picture that you showed me looks pretty cute, actually.
Yeah, that was just the prototype.
Or can you show me a real one? Like,
this will not be going in the episode sources. Here's a more realistic looking one with more fancy colors.
Cool. Oh yeah, you mentioned that it has the legs.
It has legs,
that
yeah.
Version. Oh, yeah.
Here's a few screenshots of it walking around and doing shit. Okay.
Now that wait. Now that we talk, like now that I see pictures, I feel like that I've either seen someone play this or an iteration of this. I think a friend of mine showed me this game before, or a similar game.
Well, it stuck around for a lot longer than it would normally after the release, and I'll tell you why in a second. Dude, I'm like dying. When I laugh really hard, my asthma kicks up, and then that's how you know I was laughing really hard. Okay.
You're allergic to fun.
I am allergic to fun, yeah. I'm only allowed to wallow in misery. Yeah. On the name, Nobi in Japanese can be used to mean stretch. Nobi Nobi Boy is also, or Nobi Nobi is also used to mean carefree. So Nobi Nobi Boy is a play on words. It's very Takahashi. You move around and interact with different objects and creatures. You eat things, including animals and even people, which lets you grow bigger and stretch longer. And then that lets you eat more things. Sometimes if you eat things and then you stretch, you can poop them out. And then they'll turn into weird stuff. So like one example I read was like, if you ate a person and you ate a strawberry and then you pushed them out, a person with a strawberry head would run out and start running around. It's very just like silly in that way. Yeah. You stretch further and further, and then you submit your points to a character named Sun. And then Sun, which is this gigantic human-like creature with a sun head. I'll show you a quick picture here. Gives those points to Girl. Girl is trying to stretch the whole way to the end of the solar system and then back to unite all of the planets. But the kicker is that all of the points submitted by every player playing the game are cumulative. You are working with everyone else playing the game to help Girl stretch further and further. And as she moves along, more levels on different planets would unlock. And so a journalist asked him to give a keyword that encapsulated the experience of playing the game. Quote, I would have to go with nonsense. This is kind of a nonsensical game, but that does not make it any less fun to play. The player is meant to feel like if this can be legitimately called a game, then maybe they could make a game themselves. That is what I had in mind for a long time, actually.
Wow, that's brutal.
He's like, yeah, this isn't even really a game, but if you could call it one, then maybe people could give them inspiration to make their own stuff.
Then maybe people feel good enough about the trash then to actually release it.
You know, he does this all the time where he like talks shit on his own capabilities. I think it's just how he is.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the entire, like from the picture that you showed me, it from the color palette, it just looks like he's basically remaining within his own style of what a game is. Which, I mean, if he sees himself as an artist, it's often about being distinguishable, right? So,
yep.
I think now that if I look at this, I would probably immediately think, yeah, this looks like Katamari. What's going on here? And then I could actually figure out that it is from the creator of Katamari.
Yeah, everything is sort of like weirdly exaggerated and colorful and blocky, and it's very much his style for sure.
Yep.
So, you know, he said he worried that like experimenting with, they worried a bit about experimenting with new games and ideas because it's possible, like, what if the audience doesn't get what you're trying to convey? What if they don't understand your art? And it's riskier than just making a style of games that you know people are already going to enjoy. They tried to develop it. It was originally developed on the Xbox 360 hardware, but apparently a partnership with Sony came later. Takahashi made the decision to go with the PS3 for a couple of reasons. The biggest is, again, that the sticks on the controllers tend to be adjacent and symmetrical, and that felt better to convey mechanics. He likes that a lot. But also, because it was early in that generation of consoles, he wasn't sure like how easy it would be to develop the game for multiple platforms. He brings his friend Yu Miyake to do the music again. It's good. I don't think it's like Katamari good, personal preference, but it does have some really good jams on it. Very interesting stuff. And in true Takahashi form, he said in an interview he didn't think anything about how to market it or how much it would sell or any of that. He just wanted to make it. Okay, the game released worldwide on February 19th, 2009. It only cost $5 because it was just downloadable. I don't think it had a physical release. About double that in Japan at the time. Reviews were generally positive, but a bit lukewarm compared to Katamari, and sales were kind of low. Criticism came in several forms. First, the controls were really weird, and there are like no objectives. And it's just a sandbox, which kind of turned some people off. Now, this is a time when, like, oh, what are the new graphics going to look like was, like, really emphasized. And this is just, like, weird, simple worm creature, right? Like, it's Takahashi's style, but it's not necessarily for everyone. People who came from Katamari expecting more Katamari didn't get that. The musical style was different for sure. But after the game released, Keita is like, we want to support this a bit. So they added like offline multiplayer, a bunch of various updates that added music, stuff like that. Quote, the first release of Nabi Nabi Boy had about 30% or 40% of what was intended overall. I think that's one of the strengths of the downloadable platform for games. You can keep updating to your heart's content. There are server costs and the price of the downloads, of course, so it does have its limitations. One feature was what he called Fart Boy. If you ate something, when you pooped it out, it would yell the name of the object in either English or Japanese randomly. Takahashi thought that this was really funny and said, quote, that way people will also learn Japanese. So,
nice.
So Tom, why did you...
Duolingo should try to use that.
Why did you start trying to learn Japanese? Oh, you see, this weird worm creature pooped out a dog, and then the game screamed Inu, and I didn't know what to do with that information, and so now I'm fluent in Japanese, so... You could also make boy.
You gotta build the intrinsic motivation, and you have to basically make people encounter the language. And what is the best way to encounter the language? By farting out a puppy dog and then listening.
That's exactly it. 100%. You can make boy also like dance along to whatever music was on your drive, and you know they did some stuff, but. Then there was like a funding issue that came up that had apparently been plaguing the project, and Keita didn't open up much about it until after the game's release, but it seems like he didn't really have enough money from Namco to make the game what he wanted it to be. It went over on time and over on budget, and the company was not thrilled. And he mentioned in an interview in 2009 to Eurogamer that he like announced that they were going to do like an iPhone port of the game, but that he said that it was just bait to try and get the upper executives to give him more money to keep working on the game, but that he didn't expect it would work, and it didn't really. And in that interview, someone asked him how long it would take for Girl to reach her goals if nothing about the game had been changed. And he said at the current pace, it would take 820 years. His take on it is interesting. Quote, I have absolutely no regrets regarding the way we implemented the feature. I have been told to stop acting up and add some more game-like features, but I don't want to create a game with a predetermined ending, and I think it is okay the way it is. I don't think it is right to put an ending just for the sake of it. I believe that it is all right to create a stupid and irresponsible game. I really do.
At which time was this?
About 2009.
Because this is really like a bit ahead of its time, because with the indie culture that you have today and with independent developer releases, this is absolutely, that probably strikes a note with current developers, but not 15 years ago when Steam was already good 15 years ago, but not what it is today. Yeah,
I mean now it really does feel like game creation for any weird thing you want is like really accessible if you want to put the time in.
And every year there's like a new release of something very odd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something really like very different. I totally agree. They pressed him on the fact that players didn't stick with it for long because it didn't have objectives, and then he kind of blamed himself. To paraphrase, he said that games without objectives can be fun, but that he thought that he had failed to produce something that felt like it was as fun as it could be. Here's another quote on it. Quote, bringing the title out to the market is an achievement for sure, but for me personally, a bit more could have been done to the game. I'm not completely satisfied with the game in terms of quality due to restrictions on budgets. I won't go into what I wanted to add to the game because that's a really long list of things, but as an overall assessment, I think the game could have been much more detailed and easier for everyone to understand. Ultimately, with Nabi Nabi Boy, I wanted to break the barriers between toy and game.
Cool.
Okay. So what's next? That year, he decided to leave Bandai Namco because in his opinion, their engineers, as we'd said earlier, did not have enough passion. Now, the timeline I got here was a little fuzzy on when he actually left, but I know that like he's going to announce his next thing, and at some point in that, he decides he's leaving the company. Here are some quotes from various interviews that are a bit mashed together to get the gist of it. Quote, the reason why I quit Namco was because I started to feel like I didn't belong there anymore. The games I was making were not necessarily the best selling ones. I realized Namco was, as a business, going down a bit. Also, my colleagues were leaving to do another project. I started to feel like I didn't belong there anymore. And basically, he said that they were just in it for the money. If he wanted to make something new, he would have to hire staff from the company. It was a whole thing. It was very limited. But even with all of that, this big decision, he decides that he's going to do it. And he's like, you know, quote, I was unsure, but I knew that the only option I had was to continue moving forward. Someone asked him what was the biggest change in his personal life now that he had left Namco. And he just responded with, I have more time to talk to my wife.
Good for him.
Good for him, right? In July of 2009, Namco released Katamari Forever, which was kind of like a remake of Katamari. It was the first mainline Katamari game that Keita had not been a part of. Like the PSP thing had been before, but this was like a full Katamari game. There would be many more releases, but we won't go through all of them. We'll just talk about them later. Okay, September of 2010, Keita Takahashi makes an announcement. He's leaving the gaming industry. He's going to work on other things. And what's he going to do? He's going to go work on playground equipment in Nottingham in the United Kingdom. Oh, yeah. I had some sources say, like, some sources were kind of iffy here. Like, maybe, like, Namco paid for him to do this for, like, a month and then he left or something. But I don't know. Regardless, he leaves Namco at this point. How this went down is, I guess, some of the Game City organizers from, like, the previous years set this all up for him. So like the head of the festival had made several requests for Keita to come back, and then this idea of this park like stuck, and somehow they get the city council involved and they decide that they want him to renovate this park, part of a park called Woodthorpe Grange. He would then work with the council and a landscaping expert to figure out designs and how they could integrate them, and then the council would establish a budget. And so he makes this announcement. The organizers put him in a car. They take him to a craft store. He buys a bunch of random art supplies, goes out into like this shack in the middle of some random house in the woods, shuts the door, and just starts designing.
Cool.
Quote,
Then,
I've been... What's that?
Has he come out yet, or is he still in there?
Find out in this episode of Codex Rex, the video game history podcast. Quote, I've been asked this a lot and I'm not sure like why he wants to make a playground. I've been asked this a lot and I'm not sure why. I think that nothing has really changed in my objectives. I want to make people happy. I want to create something that everyone can enjoy. He starts coming up with all these crazy designs, as you might imagine, right? Quote, so my idea is very simple. Take some existing equipment, like a swing or a slide, and you just extend them. And that makes it more fun and dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Dachz, I'm going to send you a bunch of these playground designs.
Okay, let's look at this. I'm going to describe to you how I think people would like. Okay, that's actually cool, and I think I've seen many of these in playgrounds around here. It's basically a design for a swing, but instead, usually on a swing, there's only room for one person, but it's basically like a long thing to sit on with many of the chains to the top of the swing, so like 4 people can sit on it at the same time. And that is something I've seen. That's pretty cool.
Okay, what about this?
That is like a donut slide, and you can turn it, and you can... I've seen this too. This is a normal thing. Yeah, we have those. That's pretty neat.
What about
It
this?
looks pretty fun. Okay,
A
this
park of
is
miniature
this is
trampolines.
how you're going to break a children's neck. But I mean, trampoline parks. But seriously, trampoline parks
They do
have been
exist.
opening up in the last few years a lot. So also this very innovative. It's
Mhm.
basically like 20 trampolines set up in a grid, so you can jump between the trampolines. Which okay, a huge climbing thing where you can go up, and I've seen these too. This is really good stuff. This is like if you go to a playground and see one of these huge climbing grids, when then there's a slide on top, but also like a fire ladder slide, then you know that you're on like one of the good playgrounds. Then another thing, it's basically a slide that's set into the ground. This is really cool too. Man, this guy has some very good but very basic in a good sense, playground ideas.
This thing looks like it would break your neck.
Moving chairs. You basically have a rail and there's chairs that are attached to the rail, and the rail goes in a circle. And you can sit on the rail and push them. This also, I've never seen something like this, but it looks really fun. Also, the chairs that are attached to the rail can also spin around themselves. This sort of looks really cool.
It does look cool. But it
I
does.
think my offspring would enjoy this.
So, however, the playground was not to be. Apparently, the city commissioners were not thrilled about the designs he was making, and they started to worry about safety. Further, they started having some budget issues, and they couldn't fund the project anymore. Quote,
Yeah, it's probably budget, right? Also, trampolines are probably horrible to maintain, and lots of these things are spinning, so you basically have to keep the spinning mechanism oiled up for something that is outside, which is just a nightmare.
It would be crazy. Quote, the UK's economic climate isn't very favorable, and the guy in charge of all this at Nottingham City Council has projects of greater importance, which is why all this is pretty much slowed down at this time. Okay, so Keita has left Namco. His park idea has been crushed. He seems to be without direction. But he doesn't want to go back to the corporate life of video game companies. So he thinks for a while, and he decides that he wants to return to the gaming industry. Later, he referred back to the Playground project like this. Quote, I decided I should be a billionaire to make playground equipment with my own money. So that's the reason why I keep making video games. His first step was that he and his...
I like his energy.
Yeah.
I like his energy. It's just he finds the solution to something, and after he basically came up with the solution, he figures out that he has to do other things and then does them first instead of... Yeah, it's just it's a nice way of thinking.
Yeah. His first step is that he and his wife, Asuka Sakai, would create their own gaming company, and they would call it Uvula. He would work on games and she would compose music. Why the name Uvula? Quote, I was going through the dictionary app on my phone and came across the word randomly. It jumped out at me. I didn't know the word before, but it seemed so beautiful to me. In Japanese, if you translate our word for that part of the body back into English, it comes out as something like throat penis. Something really ugly. So I like the contrast.
Nice throwback, yeah.
Nice callback, Keita. Thank you. So I like the contrast of this beautiful word in English with the weird, ugly word in Japanese.
What is the uvula? What is that?
That's the little thing that hangs in the back of your mouth, your throat.
Oh, that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I once knew the real name of it, but I forgot.
Couldn't tell you. Yeah, well, I heard it's called throat penis, is what that's called. That's the technical term.
Yeah. That sounds like the technical term.
Yeah. It's in Latin.
How's your throat penis doing?
Oh, well, I had to get it checked out. It was sore.
It was a bit of a cheap one.
It was, yeah. Yeah, well,
Still respect it.
He kept mentioning something in interviews, some project called Soup-O-Nuts, which he described as, and this is not verbatim, a web services project with true potential. I just could not find anything about this other than some vague allusions to it, so I'm guessing that didn't happen. At some point in time, he starts talking to Media Molecule, the people who made Little Big Planet. Well, that doesn't happen either. He is just like, nothing's working out. He gets an offer from a company called Flickr, Flickr, which was based in Vancouver, Canada. The co-founder was a guy named Stuart Butterfield, and he wanted Keita to come to Canada and to work for an online MMO they were making called Glitch. Apparently, Robin Hunicke, remember her from earlier from the GDC thing, had helped them make the introduction. Okay? Keita spoke to Stuart. He played a little bit of the game. They found out that they share some of the same values about games, and he makes Keita an offer to work here. And Keita says, quote, "I thought there was no reason for me not to go." Here's an idea of Glitch. It would be a casual, multiplayer browser game, an experimental sort of MMO thing. The world that the players would be inhabiting would be, as I saw it described, quote, "created by the imaginings of 11 god giants." Or, as they put it in the announcement trailer, they sing this, I'm not going to sing it for you. Quote, "For a really long time, 11 giants walked around. They thought of funny things until their thinking came alive. And that's what this game is. You're inside their thoughts. Go and make them bigger, and we'll play for a long while."
Sounds cute.
Yeah, cute little thing. The intention was that the community of the game would be able to influence the way that the world would develop. You would do quests, and the outcome of those quests might change the persistent world that everyone was playing in. So, like, you could grow a tree, and then other people could see that tree. You could alter the world for everyone. Quote, "The game is about creating various objects from elements that are gathered throughout the game world. You can harvest butterflies, milk, or wheat, assemble them, and begin greater quests. It's basically a game centered on daily activities, such as making bread or producing various resources. Glitch aims at placing the player in this perspective. A lot of work has been done with regards to the game's visual aspect." I actually have this quote here, and I'm actually not sure if that was Keita, so sorry if I misattributed that. It was a free-to-play thing. They would make money through cosmetics. Also, it had this weird tutorial I thought I would mention, and weird just because novel, I guess. So, okay, you know, like when you start a game, and there's usually like a tutorial, and they say, here's how you play this game. Here's all the motions, here's all the buttons you hit, right? Even in an MMO, you might end up in a tutorial area. So like if you start up World of Warcraft these days, it'll drop you onto like a ship, or I don't know if it's still a ship, but it's like a little tutorial area where they go, here are your abilities, here are how you use them, here's how you play the game, here's how you loot things, that shit, okay? In Glitch, you got put into a tutorial area, and the people in the tutorial area were Glitch staff members or approved players who would come over to you and personally teach you how to play the game. Like real people, and their only job was to make sure that you knew how to play the game. That was it. They would sit in the tutorial area and teach people how to play.
How cool, but also how very likely to fail at some point.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. Like it adds like this really fun human aspect of like a real person comes up to you and says, hey, let me help you learn how to play this game. But also there's a lot of room for weird error there.
Yeah.
Okay. The game was released on September 27th, 2011 into a public beta. Apparently this beta only lasted 2 months because developers were noticing that the game wasn't meeting their expectations. They switched to test sessions where they would open the game to the public, generate a list of bugs, and then close the game to fix them again. Keita also started to see problems internally. He felt that the game's developer, Tiny Speck, had shifted their focus away from Glitch and started putting their effort into a real-time collaboration platform that they were using internally. So they're like, well, we're making this game, but also here's this interesting collaborative platform. Maybe we'll put our energy there. And somewhere along the way, Robin Hunicke joined the team. So this woman, okay, she shows up again. My sources say maybe somewhere around March of 2012. She works there for a time, and this is like her first thing right after she had finished up working on a game called Journey. She was in charge of Journey. It released to much fanfare, and when her time with the game was done, she's like, oh, I'm going to like go to Tiny Speck where Keita Takahashi is. I'm not sure what happens. She does not stay there long. She leaves. Okay? By December of 2012, Glitch permanently closed down. There was not enough of a user base to support the game. Keita posted a bunch of his ideas that he had for the game online, You can still go peek through them. They are crazy and super weird. It's great. So Keita leaves the company. Away he goes. But the development team that had been working on this messaging system created for internal communications, they create the messaging platform that we now know as Slack. Okay?
Oh, nice.
Do you know Slack?
I've worked with Slack. Yeah.
Right? They make Slack. Someone asked him why he didn't just stay and work on the Slack team, and he says, quote, "There'd be nothing for me to do, right? I'm a game designer." So, here's Keita again in the wind. What's he going to do? Well, first, he decides he's not going to go back to Japan for various reasons. Instead, he and his wife moved to San Francisco in the United States. He talked about how different it was adjusting to the United States, the language difference, the cultural differences. And in 2012 and 2013, and this is something that you'll see Keita do a lot in his downtime, he makes like weird little shit that like is just like very small. He's always doing something. He's never like bored, I guess. I can't speak for him, but he always seems like he's making something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In 2012 and 2013, Keita made some video game installations for the Baby Castle Summit. To summarize what that is, the summit is just a place to exhibit interesting video games or like weird installations.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For one installation, he worked with a man named Adam Saltzman, who is an indie developer. A little bit about Saltzman, because we're not going to get too much into him. After he works with Takahashi, he goes on to direct the game studio that made Night in the Woods, Overland, Tunic, Chicory, A Colorful Tale, right? Like he gets involved in all these things. But now he's working with Keita. They make this game called Alphabet. It gets some funding through Kickstarter. Alphabet is this weird little game where you guide anthropomorphic English language letters with legs. They just have legs. So like a running letter B or whatever. Okay. They're going through obstacle courses. You hold down the corresponding character on your keyboard to make that character run forward. When you let go of the letter will jump. That's the entire game. You're trying to get them through this obstacle course. The trick is that you control multiple letters at the same time on your keyboard. So you start off with one letter, and then you start off with 3 letters and 5 letters, and then you're literally trying to control every single letter of the English language at the same time to get them through obstacle courses in a time frame. It is frantic. It is goofy. It is overwhelming. It's a short little thing. It had an arcade cabinet. It was great. You can play it online. I will put it in the show notes.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. For another installation, he teams up with 2 groups. The groups are called Venus Patrol and Wild Rumpus. They create something called Tenya Wanya Teens. This is a 2-player game that looks like a side-scrolling beat-em-up. You are helping a cartoon boy perform activities by hitting the right button on a large list of buttons at the right time. A parrot will show up and tell you what action you need to do. To play through a full play of the game, it takes 5 minutes. You need 2 people, and you are competing in a series of situations. The game starts to speed up and get weird. Let me get you some pictures because it is funky. So first off, here is the controller. Okay, it's a little blurry because these are off of Keita's his own like Twitter, but you can see how it has a whole bunch of buttons, and then in this picture you can see how the buttons light up in different colors. Okay. Very much his style,
very much
right?
his style.
Like here's
very much, yeah.
Look at this picture of gameplay, right? Like this bird's popping up and it's saying hit the red button to punch.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a picture of a real bird, and then in the background everything is drawn in the Keita style. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So first the game might say hit the green button. And you look down, and every button on the controller is green. You can't fail. You hit the button. Then it might say, hit the red button. You look down. Half the buttons are red, half the buttons are green. And then they're all different.
It gets more complicated.
So one button, right? One button, just some ones I pulled from this. One button lets you brush your teeth. One button lets you punch something. One lets you take a shower. One lets you tell someone you love them. One of the buttons, you just start peeing. You just start peeing everywhere. There's a pee button. One of the buttons lets you turn into a bear and try to catch a fish in a river. One of the buttons lets you, quote, study porn magazines that you found in the woods. So not only do you have to keep track of what color button does what, but then the colors move around. So you develop this muscle memory. You're like, oh, I'm going to hit the green button. I'm going to hit the green button. Well, now the green button's on the fucking right side of the controller, right? And so suddenly you're doing all these wrong things, right? You need to punch somebody, but you turn into a bear. You want to tell someone you love them, but you start peeing on them, right? You have to be fast and you have to get the input in before your partner does. It is absolute madness.
So, but also, again, in his style, a silly, goofy game that tries to challenge a few ideas.
Yep, it's so very him. Okay, as we move forward to the modern day, we need to pivot back to Robin Hunicke, okay? The same woman who made Journey. Shows up a bunch. She leaves working on Glitch, and she decides she's going to create her own game company. One thing that she had in her corner was that because of, her previous work, she's very well known in the San Francisco indie scene at the time. She creates a company called Phenomena with a man named Martin Middleton. And because the company's in San Francisco, who else is living in San Francisco? Keita Takahashi. She extends an offer. Why not come work for the new company? He accepts and gets hired in 2013. And if I'm correct, this seems to be like the third time she's opened a door for him, right? Like GDC, the Tiny Speck Glitch game, and then this. Yep. Her company sets this, they have these broad ideas of growth, okay? Like the company's going to grow, but we also want everybody to grow personally. All employees are going to learn, they're going to work together and whatever these goals are, okay? So you're going to be helping the company, but you're going to be helping yourself. We will touch on this later. And they have some very lofty goals at the start. They have a number of concepts they want to work on, but they get a lot of fanfare. They got Keita Takahashi, to join their new company. And he's going to start working on something immediately. The game would be called Watam, which is a mashup of the Tamil word Vatam and the Japanese word wa, both of which can mean circle. Okay? The game was inspired by Keita's experiences living outside of Japan. Working in Vancouver, he had met so many people with so many different backgrounds and life experiences. And all these people come in, they all speak all these different languages, but they found ways to communicate to work toward a common goal. Further, he was feeling kind of bummed out about the homelessness problem in San Francisco, and he decides he wants to make a game about different kinds of people coming together to solve problems. Quote, human beings are so different and they're living on the same planet. I just wanted to make a video game where so many different people work together to get over the differences, make something new. It's such fun. That's the original idea of Watam. And in another quote, I believe if we are all the same, if we had the same clothes, same perspective, same skin color, same religion, then that's so weird. That's strange. Even when I see the same type of car as me, I feel strange. So I just believe that while differences make so many problems, it's differences that make our cultures more deep, more nice, and make our perspective more wide. I just wanted to make a video game about our differences, but a game that would get over our differences. So there's his lofty goals again, right?
Yep.
I'm slightly
same old thing.
Yep. Same old Keita. I'm slightly jumping ahead in development, but to give you an idea of how this game plays. The game starts. You are a single character. You are a green block with a face, arms and legs, and a hat. He's like this little mayor guy, okay? And he's crying at the beginning of the game. He's all alone. And so you go through the game doing weird things to please various strange critters and make them happy, and then they kind of join you, okay? And then you can play as them. Many of them speak different languages or have strange tones and weird little melodies to their voices. I pulled this from a Polygon article because I think it perfectly encapsulates what it is like to play this game. I've played this game. Quote, here is just one random snippet of gameplay. The square mayor teaches a circle, who speaks Russian, how to use their magic hats to explode and fly around in the sky, and now they are friends. This makes a giant bucket show up in the sky, festooned with cloud-shaped text that says, welcome back, bucket. This isn't even the most unexplainable thing that happens in the game. It's pretty much all like this. You can play as over 100 different characters, each with their own weird little abilities. The game is basically a giant puzzle as you try to figure out what different characters want or need, and then you move around in this sandbox area sort of solving their problems, right? So there's a phone and it's crying because its friend, the receiver to the phone, is gone and you have to go find them and bring them back together, right? Things like that. But we should talk about development because that's the real story here. Sony gets involved with this deal because why wouldn't they? They always get involved with Keita. And they pitch exclusivity, meaning Sony's going to be the sole publisher. Phenomena takes the deal. Watam is an exclusive to the PlayStation. It is seen as a major coup in the industry at this time. You have the woman who like basically made Journey, and you have Keita Takahashi, and like this company's working on this game, and Sony gets it. Okay. They show the first little
like a winning recipe.
Yep, right. The game was first shown in December 2014 at the PlayStation Experience Showcase, and there's excitement. But then things start to get weird at Phenomena. Takahashi and Haneke apparently do not work well together, and they begin to fight over various design and production goals. And these don't turn into small squabbles. Apparently, it got so bad at the offices at one point that the two physically barricaded themselves like something out of a cartoon on different sides of the office so that they did not have to physically see each other. And then if they had to talk to each other, they would send notes through other employees.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. Haneke was acting as both a producer and a CEO and was struggling to keep the cat motivated. I looked up his
I just lifted my cat and Tyler had to say cat.
Oh, look at it. Kawaii neko. Look at that cat. Oh my God. To describe this cat to you, it is the cutest cat. It is big and fluffy and gray and adorable, and it is laying in Dachz's arms. I love it. I love the little tufts of hair coming out of her ears. Just the big poofs.
She has so much hair.
She's very cute. I have met that cat in real life, and she is just as cute in real life.
She is.
Okay, so Haneke was serving as both a producer and the CEO and was struggling to keep the staff motivated as the game developed. And there were other games in development too, being made by different teams. I read some stuff during this time that workers claimed that they would need to work late for their personal growth. This is how you personally grow, is by doing overtime. There are claims that she started being manipulative to them to get them to work longer. It seemed that the workplace started becoming toxic. And I don't have an exact date here, but sometime in 2016, this is a couple years later, Sony decides they're pulling out of the exclusivity deal. Some articles claimed that Sony had cited shifting priorities regarding indie publishing and that they no longer wanted to pursue the game. Keita was never officially told why, but he said he didn't really care what the reason was. Phenomena starts announcing layoffs. Apparently, Haneke disappeared and was unreachable for an entire week. This leaves Watam in limbo. They had been using the Unity engine to create Watam, but Takahashi claimed it was quite old compared with other engines at the time and that everything was starting to look bad. He had felt that the engine couldn't make his core ideas happen, and if they wanted to move forward, they would have to recreate the game in something else. They would have to find a new publisher, hire new employees, and do a massive amount of work. But they still believed it was a good game, and the company decides to press forward. As he described it in an interview, quote, "I'm happy and unhappy." So Keita, like I said, in his downtime, starts making weird shit again. He created an augmented reality project for Google in 2016. It was called World with 2 O's. As he put it, quote, "I had time and I needed the money." It was released for their augmented reality platform called Tango. Tango was this Google thing where apparently like software would allow you to create AR experiences, and then it would get paired with like certain smartphones and tablets that would like, handle that stuff. And it was like really good at scanning rooms and like letting you do stuff in that space. Think of it as a precursor to home VR. So World was this short little thing. You'd use the camera, you'd map out a room using a goofy little box character, and then you could place things in the room. And if you mapped it well enough, like characters would like walk around and interact with things, and they'd like walk under your table and shit. And like you could decorate it with little objects and like make the room crazy. So if you put like a little spigot in the room, it would fill with water. You could throw a drain on the ground and it would drain the water. Like UFOs would show up and mess with the shit you made. And like, it was fun. Okay.
That sounds cool.
Okay. Do you remember the earlier story about that company Panic, right? That they worked at the t-shirts and they later published Untitled Goose Game. Well, Panic had a bit of a history of trying to shake things up in their company. And, you make the same thing forever, it gets boring, right? And I did a little bit of research for this, but I'm going to skim the story here. They decided that they wanted to make some kind of fun little device for their most loyal customers for what would be their 20th anniversary. What came from this was a tiny little console that they called the Playdate. Imagine Imagine a yellow square, not much bigger than a Post-it note with a little screen. But the special thing about the console is that it has this little crank that pops out the side, and you use it as a mechanism to play games. Okay.
Yeah.
I was doing research for this episode, and I found out about this little console and how Keita got wrapped up in this. And I showed it to my wife, and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. But it's like, I'm like unemployed right now, and there's no way I could buy this dumb little stupid console. And we had agreed that we were not going to buy each other stuff for Christmas, and then we both lied and we both bought each other stuff. And she bought me.
It always happens. Yeah.
She bought me a Playdate console, and I have one right here. It's a little blurry for Dachz. There it is. Okay, but see, it's like
you already showed me pictures of it, so I know it. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We talked about this.
It looks
already.
like a little tiny Game Boy.
Kind of, yeah.
Right.
But
it has a crank on the side.
Right, the crank comes out, and then you turn it. Right, and
you basically does it have integrated games?
So how it works is, I thought this was really fun. When you buy it, you set up an account and you link it to your Playdate, even if you bought a secondhand one. And then every week you get this little thing that pops up, and it says new. It's a little hard to show you, but it says new games available. And when I open it up, I get 2 new games each week that are wrapped up like little presents. And you open them and find out what it is, because they liked the idea of you don't know what you're going to get each week. So like one was like a music maker, and one was like a weird thing about birds, and like it's just whatever they could get. So now, I don't know how this deal went down, but given their previous history with Keita Takahashi, they approach him and ask him if they want to make a game. Okay, so he comes up with a goofy game called Kranken's Time Travel Adventure. I will show it to you. I played it on stream the other day. Here is how this reads. Kranken loves taking naps, but that is always a cause of more trouble. Being late to work or missing flights. And today, he woke up from a nap at the exact time he was supposed to meet a date. Advance or rewind Kranken's timeline. Hurry to the next meeting place where your loved one, Krankette, is waiting, and apologize for being late. So, literally, the entire mechanism is you pop the little crank out of this console. When you turn it forward, he moves forward. When you turn it backward, he moves backward. And they just play with that. So, like, okay, if you get hit by, like, a bug or something, you have to go back to the beginning of the level. But maybe at a certain point, Kranken stops down to like smell a flower. Well, if you like rewind to when he was smelling the flower, the bug will fly over you. Or like there's a level where you walk out of your house and you just get chased by a stampede of pigs, and you have to just crank it as fast as you possibly can to get away from them. Or like dumb shit like that, right? Or like jump up on a thing and hang, and your segmented body will fall apart so birds can fly through it. Like totally him, totally fucking weird. And it was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll wrap up this stuff on Watam, and then we'll start wrapping up the episode. So in 2017, Annapurna Interactive agrees to publish the game and provided the team with an infusion of funds and support. They rebuild the game from the ground up. They fix the graphical issues, and they finish it. But they had to recruit new people. They had to update everything. It was a whole thing. Apparently what I read is that Haneke decided to like step back working on Watam and just focus on running the company. That seemed to have helped move things along. It released December 19th of 2019 after 5 years of development. It was on the PlayStation 4. The Epic Game Store had a 1-year exclusivity deal. Reviews were mixed. The controls are weird. Sometimes it can be a little unintuitive what you need to do, but man, it was fun for what it was. I played it on my stream a few times. It's just insane. Like if you can just condense the idea of joy into a puzzle, it's how it is. But I can only play for like an hour or two, because I'd say to them, I'd be like, there's just so much like constant laughter and like dumb shit that like I feel like my brain's melting. Like I need to like turn to something more cerebral for a minute. Like,
yep.
Okay. So that is the story of the creation of Katamari, and like all the weird shit that Keita has been up to since then, and we'll kind of talk through a little bit of that as we wrap up. So, Keita and his wife live in San Francisco with their 2 children. They are still making games with their company, Uvula. His wife, Asuka Sakai, is still making music, although sometimes that's outside of the gaming industry. Sometimes she does music for like different animes. I think her most recent credits that I looked up were she did the music for an anime called Stardust Telepath in 2013, and she did some testing on Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. How does one get that role? I would love to know.
Cool.
They announced in late 2023, they announced a new game. Uviel announced a new game called Takahashi called To a T, which is a game about a boy who is stuck in a T-pose. Quote, To a T is a 3D narrative adventure game developed by Keita Takahashi and the Uvula team with a strong focus on character, interaction, story, and exploration. Play as teenager, parentheses, teen, with a unique posture, just trying to live a normal life in a small...
I get the pun.
Yeah. To a T. Yeah. Explore the town with the help of Teen's loyal dog and loving mother. Although I guess the dog and the mother are probably different characters. While going to school and contending with bullies, Teen discovers a new ability granted to them by their extraordinary posture, and they start to uncover more about their mysterious lineage. I'm just glad that Keita Takahashi just is still out there doing his weird shit, right? Yeah. He still talks about making that playground someday. He mentions it in interviews. I feel like it is the project he never got to do. Yu Miyake, who did all of the music for those games, left Bandai Namco in 2011. He went freelance because he felt that he could no longer grow at the company. He still contributed tracks to other Bandai Namco games, but does other things now, including playing music as a DJ, and he lectures at Tokyo Polytechnic University. Phenomena, the studio that Takahashi worked for, appears to have closed. In March of 2022, a YouTube video released by People Make Games collected various accounts of those working in the indie gaming scene, and specifically focused on 3 studios that had allegations of emotional abuse in the workplace. Robin Hunicke was accused of various things, mostly including using the personal information about the lives of her employees to belittle them, spread rumors about them, and manipulate them into working long hours. Now, I don't usually like to wade into too much drama like that on the podcast, but right after that, Hunicke publicly acknowledged her behavior, apologized for it, but the company announced mass layoffs and then totally shut down all contractors, let go, no severance. They have a working website, but nothing's been released. It seems to be done. Like Watam came out.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Okay. Wrap up on Katamari. Bandai Namco has released, from my count, 19 different Katamari games. Most of them were mobile games. There's some interesting stuff in there, including a puzzle game, a short-lived Katamari MMO that only existed in the Korean market, but none of these attempts really captured that old magic, right? The most recent games that they released were remakes of both Katamari and We Love Katamari. I played the first one and it was fun. I have the second one and I'm going to play it. But on a bit of a sad note on those, the games were remastered without any input from Takahashi, and from what I can tell, he has said he gets no royalties from Katamari at all.
Whoa.
None. Quote, "That is the nature of the business. I am not important. The game is important. But myself, who cares?"
Oh.
Right? He thinks that, he said in interviews that he thinks Namco doesn't understand the spirit of Katamari, and that's why he quit. And that he's glad he quit. But I expect that anytime they need to drum up some more money, they'll probably remake another Katamari. Katamari was one of the first video games acquired to be part of the permanent collection of the Museum in Modern Art in 2012. It is on display and playable alongside other culturally important games. This includes many we have covered in the podcast, such as Tetris, Flow, Portal, and Space War, which subsequently are all Dachz episodes. Yep. I just want to
covered some bases.
You did, yeah. I just want to say, how funny is it that Keita Takahashi started out saying, I don't want to make art that will end up in a museum. I want people to experience it. And now his thing that he made is in a museum. Irony.
God fucking damn it.
I didn't want it in a museum. Here's a quote from Boss Fight Books, the Boss Fight Books thing that I used. Quote, "Even as video game technology has advanced so much since the game's release, Katamari Damacy stands out today because it offers us a type of play more common to children on a playground, something uniquely internal and almost anarchic. It's like building a tower of blocks just for the sheer joy of pushing it down." It's kind of a good way to put it.
Cool. Yeah, it is.
I also think it's interesting that, like many stories we've told on this podcast, there like so many times that game came close to never existing at all, right? And now looking back, it's like this true innovation in the gaming space. If you want to play it, I recommend the modern remakes. I know Keita doesn't get any money for them, but they just run so much better. They're really good. On Nobby Nobby Boy, it only took 4 days for Girl to reach the moon, but it took until the last week of December 2011 for her to reach Uranus. On December 14th, 2015, Girl finally made it the whole way to Pluto and back to the sun. As the game had been several years old at this point, they had turned on a few modifiers to make the process easier. And when she did reach the sun, all players who participated in the game were sent a letter. I think it was in-game, it wasn't a physical one. And it congratulated them for their achievement. Apparently, Keita wrote it on the day of release and doesn't remember doing it at all. He said it was like reading it for the first time. From start to finish, it took players 2,489 days.
Good job, players.
Good job, players of Nobby Nobby Boy. World, the AR thing that I mentioned, still appears to be downloadable on PC, but I think to play it, you have to have one of the original phones or tablets. Glitch. A bunch of Glitch's source code was released to the public. There have been some fan reboots to reboot the game, like attempt to do that, but I haven't seen one stick. They're out there if you want to check them out. Tenya Wanya Teens is currently playable at the Seattle Museum of Pop Culture in their Indie Game Revolution exhibit. I have narrowly missed going to this a couple of times when I was in Seattle. Bummer I didn't get to do it. Alphabet, the game about running all the little characters, is downloadable off itch.io. However, they made a free version available on archive.org. I'll put both of them in the links. Watam is just out there in like every place you could get a game. Kranken's Time Travel Adventure is only on the Playdate console. It's part of their season of games. I don't know if it'll ever come out other places, but I don't know how it would work without the cranks. So, okay, let's just do a very broad wrap up here. In 2019, Telfair Museums did the first museum survey work of Keita Takahashi called Zooming Out. Keita designed all the graphics for the exhibition, vinyl stickers and walls, and helped them to design it. And why I mention this is that I think it's just really cool to see his work recognized like that, because I personally think that he has had such a profound impact on the game industry and of game design. And like, I think about how all of his work tends to like touch on deeper meanings, right? So like consumerism and the value of stuff and like noticing the world around us and what it's like to have strained relationship with your parents and like things that make people happy and how things that are fun can be simple. They don't have to be complicated, right? Like all these things are like design like elements throughout his games that I think really stuck and really changed, I don't know, kind of how the industry saw games. I don't want to fully give him this huge credit, but it was just so different at the time.
He was definitely part of it.
Yeah.
From what you've told us.
I would also say that, I think it's really interesting how he keeps ending up paired with these companies and people that either like take advantage of him or don't fit his vision or the company falls apart. And I was thinking about this when I was working on this episode. And I was like, is it just because he works with like indie groups or startups? Is it because of clashes over creative style? But I think the big thing is I would say the man is very willing to take risks. Sometimes risks do not pick off, or they don't pay off rather. And so, I hope that the man has much more success in the future and that all these companies stop crumbling around him. But, I just think like we should give him some credit for what he did. What's your takeaway here, Dachz?
Yeah, I think the most important takeaway for me is that a lot of success in art seems to come down to, of course, luck, but also persistence. Because because there's many talented artists around the world, but he was in luck to early in his life encounter that one spot where a door opened to him, like a very promising door. Because if we basically look on the continuation of his life, there was other doors that opened for him that he took that probably wouldn't have multiplied his renown as much as that first door that we heard about did. That door that gave him the position at Namco and gave him the chance to make Katamari. So it's basically his persistence that helped him come to the spot that he was at, and then to create something so absolutely unique as Katamari. Yeah, I find truly amazing. So I think that's my takeaway. If you want to make it in the art world, you have to be committed and very persistent in what you want to do. And maybe it's fine to not compromise, but sometimes you probably have to. It's really difficult. There's no perfect recipe.
Yeah, I think you can say that is, I don't know, broadly just life, right? You have to persist. Sometimes you have to compromise. Sometimes you don't always get what you want. Yeah, I think what I really thought interesting about his story is just how many times that, like, I don't know, just things just didn't work out for him and he kept on going, like you said. So,
yeah, just get up and keep doing it.
Yeah. So I want to finish with a quote and then a question. Okay? Here's a quote. I know our lives are not so fun. They are boring. We do the same things over and over. But we should be celebrating the good things in life. Then we can become better people. So here's my question. Dachz, I'm going to ask you. Somebody asked Keita Takahashi this at a panel one time. What do you think is the best thing in the world? I'll go with mine first, just to give you time. I wrote down laughter. I think laughter is the best thing in the world. I think that, like, when I think of things that in my life made me the happiest, it was when I was laughing with people. Like, we still think back. You know, my wife and I still joke about times we laughed really hard until we couldn't breathe. That, for me, laughter. What about you?
I don't think I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to stick with yours. Yours is too good. Laughter, yeah.
Okay.
Just the joy of it and how it overtakes you and how you forget yourself in the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's the greatest thing in the world. Yeah, you're right.
Here's how he answered this. It's all so serious, he says before tapping his foot, trying to come up with the best thing about Earth. Cat, he says after a surprisingly long pause. Cat is the best thing.
That is also true. Yeah.
And with that, thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our ever-talented editor, Andre. And thank you to you, Dachz, for this very long episode. To all of you who have asked me to do a Keita Takahashi episode, here it is. It is done. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. This was really nice.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. I had a blast making this.
And I hope all of you have a good day. And send us suggestions for other episodes that we could do. Otherwise, we will just do whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah.
And we will see you for the next episode.
Catch you later, friends. See ya.
Bye.
How do you pronounce this? I cannot forget that moment when everyone started laughing. Everyone started laughing. Started laughing. Laughing. Laughing.
Laughing. Laughing.
Sorry, Andre. Sorry, Andre. Sorry, Andre. All right. So first, we'll do a countdown and 3 claps, and then a countdown and the Super Mario Brothers theme. How's that sound?
Okay.
Okay, and we're going to do like clap, clap, clap.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, clap, clap, clap.
Okay, so you count me down. Okay.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
One. Oh shit! I'm supposed to do it at the same time. Why do we fuck this up? Okay, so all right. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Why do we suck at this very so much? Oh fuck.
Okay, let's do the Super Mario
All right.
thing. Just go. He's gonna figure
Okay.
it out.
He's gonna be so.
I'm gonna say dun 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 dun, and then we're gonna both do. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3 first. 1, 2, 3. Dun 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 dun,
Okay.
dun, and then clap. Okay.
Okay,
1, 2, 3. Dun 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 dun.
Well, I'm sure we just fucked that up, but that's okay. It is time to record now. Da, 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 da. All right. Okay, cool. Here we go.